in some ways, it seems like we were kind of put together. We were in the same places at the same time.
Doing the same things.
Yeah. And I guess when the time was right, the gods decided, hey, this is what you're doing.
Salutations, listeners, and welcome back to Glitch Bottle, where we uncork the uncommon in magic, mysticism, and the generally misunderstood. I'm Alexander F., and today we have a real treat. We get a sneak peek inside the lives of Solomonic power couple Aaron and Carrie Leitch. Now, listeners, both Carrie and Aaron have been on the podcast separately before, but listeners get the pleasure of hearing the wisdom of both Aaron and Carrie at the same time. Just a very quick background for the few listeners who surprisingly don't know who Carrie and Aaron are. Aaron wrote one of the first books that many in the magical and Solomonic communities consider one of the foundational introductions to the practice and theory behind grimoiric magic, Secrets of the Magical Grimoires. And Aaron's also a member of the Golden Dawn, and Carrie has studied several esoteric traditions for more than 25 years. She has training in traditional Golden Dawn and Rosicrucian symbolism and tarot interpretation, among many, many other interests. And in the bravest decision she's made to date, Carrie also took the step to marry the rambunctious Aaron Leitch many, many moons ago. And more than 3 years ago, both Aaron and Carrie co-founded Doc Solomon's Occult Curios, where people can procure materia, magica, and Solomonic items from many of the most well-known grimoires, all properly consecrated and prepared. And in this episode, we discuss how Carrie and Aaron met, raising their daughter, regarding the Solomonic system, leaving the muggle world professionally, what being a grimoiric purist really means, flying coconuts, new classes that Carrie and Aaron will teach, chalices that are spilling, and how this Solomonic power couple navigates the day-to-day. And now to help us uncork the uncommon, I give you Aaron and Carrie Leitch. Aaron and Carrie Leitch, thank you both so much for coming on the podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us back.
Absolutely.
Do you guys ever look back that you might be one of the only Solomonic families ever?
Well, until now, not really.
Yeah, it's not something we really thought a lot about, although we are very aware that we're kind of forging ahead in territory. I mean, we always have been forging ahead in territory that's kind of unexplored. So not really so much looking back, but, looking forward really, because we don't know of any other couples or families that practice this tradition either, except those who are growing, I guess, as the movement grows and our students and such. So that's a very interesting experience, is watching all of this grow and seeing the revived interest that's happened in the past couple of decades for the old magics. When we started, there was no community support at all for this kind of thing. And that's one of the big differences between what we do and what, say, like Santeria or Voodoo or the Native American traditions, or
even Wicca. People are raising their kids in Wicca and stuff.
Even in Wicca, there's a big community support and structure for it. But for the old magics like that, like the African traditions and the old European traditions and such, that our culture's been so divorced and disconnected from them for so long. We kind of feel like we're out here by ourselves, hacking through the underbrush a lot.
And there doesn't seem to be a lot of people who they work with their partners magically. So, being that this is what we've always done together, when AJ came along, it kind of happened naturally. It wasn't something that we were necessarily intending to do, but because magic basically is our lives, this is what we do.
This way, yeah.
It kind of became its own
And remember,
thing.
We may be the only Solomonic magical couple we know, but, we've got other examples. Chick and Tabitha, they're like mom and dad, at this point. We've watched them for years, and they're an incredible magical couple. Mm-hmm. I know they're not together anymore, but back in our early days, there was Sarita Dast and David Rankine were a couple. It was sad to see that they went their separate ways, because we kind of considered them us across the pond. They were like a reflection of us over there. Whether it worked out wonderfully or whether they went their separate ways, we've seen magical couples operate with each other, and So we had a lot of good examples. And there's that community support again. Solomonic or no, there have been wonderful people that we've learned from that made what we do possible. So we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We may be exploring unexplored territory, but, we didn't get here by ourselves by any means.
To that point, Aaron and Carrie, could you kind of share from each of your perspectives, like, how did you two meet, and talk about that journey of starting down this awesome path of life together? I think a lot of listeners might be somewhat familiar, but they might not know the whole story.
That's going to be kind of a long story because we've known each other since we were in high school.
Yes, that's the thing. I was reading the questions that you sent us, and a lot of people seem to have this vision that we were both magical practitioners, and we met, we saw each other from across a crowded, occult gathering, and decided that, we were going to work together. But that's really not what happened at all. We met sort of in high school because my best friend and her best friend were dating. Carrie and I have actually been on double dates with each other where we weren't dating. We were each the third wheel. They were on a date. In fact, I remember sitting in a theater watching Beauty and the Beast. This is when that happened, when Beauty and the Beast.
That was what, like 1991, I guess?
Yeah, we're talking about the cartoon, not this live action BS. But the cartoon Beauty and the Beast. We were sitting in the theater, 4 people, so the 2 of them were sitting together, and I was sitting by my friend Mike, and she was sitting by her friend Danielle, and that was, like our first date. But we didn't say like word one to each other.
Not really.
I mean, really
other than just...
We knew of each other in high school, but we hardly knew each other.
We hung out in the same crowd and stuff, but... You were a year ahead of me, so you graduated and moved out west.
Yep, I moved out to Cheyenne, Wyoming. I was there briefly, and then I moved down into Denver. Nothing happened in Cheyenne. Nothing ever happens in Cheyenne. But then the real story that you guys are looking for is when I came back from Denver. While I was gone, and I guess you started kind of in high school.
Yeah, I started in high school.
And I kind of started in high school, too. But she had discovered Wicca. She was actually going down the whole... She was buying the Llewellyn books and had the robe and the sword. She was kind of doing a more structured thing, whereas I was doing magic, but I was kind of doing a lot of intuitive stuff, and I hadn't discovered any real... I think I had picked up Don Craig's book several times in bookstores and then put it right back down because I didn't understand it. So I was like nowhere in high school with my practice. So I moved away, and that's where I ended up because I became a Ren Fair. I became a Rennie. The Larkspur, this is in Colorado, the Larkspur Ren Fair is basically wall-to-wall pagans. It's a big pagan festival is what it is. Or at least it was in 93. So that's where I finally got a little more structure. I started with Don Craig's book, met other people who were actually doing this stuff. So I moved back, and I was already a pagan, working through learning ceremonial magic. I might have been in lesson 4 or 5 of Don Craig's book at that point. I was over at my friend Mike's house, and Danielle was there. Those two had broken up 8 eons ago.
No, they were still together at that point.
Oh, at that point they were still together. I'm sorry. We were both over there, and this is, again, we were the third wheels again. I think your friend had told me that you had been practicing Wicca.
Yep.
So when she walked in the room, I said, "Oh, hey, Carrie, I hear you practice Wicca." And Carrie turned around and walked out of the room and out of the house without saying to me. I actually had to chase her out of the house, and I caught her in the driveway. Well,
I had already had some bad experiences
remember, this
with
is
people
Florida.
like that.
Yeah,
this is Florida, so that was, in a lot of areas, that was not something that was acceptable, So I had already had several bad experiences, and the way he came across, it was just like, I'm out of here.
Excuse me, walk away.
You're walking away. You both are third wheels. This thing was a soap opera from the beginning. I mean,
it really was. It was. The gods were just playing us like chess
it gets
pieces.
better.
I chased her down, and I'm like, no, I really want to know if you practice Wicca. And her friend had chased us out too. And she's like, "Carrie, be proud of what you are. Say what you believe." And Carrie's just sitting there. She wouldn't say a word. And so I said, finally, I was like, "Look." And I pulled out my pentacle that I had around my neck. Of course, you always wear it under your clothes in Florida. So I pulled it out.
Then we did.
Back then we did. And I pulled that out and showed her. And of course, once you flash that badge between Wiccans, it's like, oh, okay. And so the conversation started. And it turned out that we were both practicing, and we were both patronizing the only pagan occult store in Orlando, Florida at the time was called Dragonswood.
Yeah.
There was this whole thing about our first meeting at Dragonswood, too.
Yeah, I was in college at the time, and I grew up in a very, very strict Southern house where, you know, there was, even after I turned 18, I still had a lot of rules. I was kept a very close eye on. So after I would get out of class, sometimes I would go to Dragonwood, and that's how we ended up dating, was because I was supposed to be in class, but I was skipping school and dating him. Anyhow, just one afternoon, I happened to stop in there, and as I'm opening the front door, now I hadn't seen him in months, and I open the front door, and just as I'm opening the front door, he's walking out of the bathroom, which is directly in the back of the store. It's like a direct line of sight. And it was like, oh, what are you doing here?
We both opened the doors at the same time. I was like, oh, hi.
And that was where it really began.
Yeah, that was actually where I asked her out the first time.
Yep.
I was actually already married and had a son. That marriage didn't work out too well, bless her heart. By the way, I'm still very good friends with her. There's no animosity. But the marriage just, you know, we were young and stupid, and, you know, and it didn't work out. And so I was kind of depressed, and God, I was having a conversation with someone, and they're like, why don't you just ask somebody out? I mean, it can't hurt, you know, just at least break up your monotony and change your, you know, get some novelty in your life, you know, even if you go out on a date and it doesn't work, at least you're doing something. So I was like, what the hell? So when she walked in that day,
I didn't know that part of the story.
I was like, screw it. So
25 years, and that's the first time I've heard that part of the story.
Yep, I asked her out, and she said yes. And
but I didn't know it was a date.
Apparently had no clue.
You had no idea, Carrie?
Yes.
Nope.
Had no idea. You know, because, you know, like I said, I knew he was married. I knew, you know, through our friends and stuff that things really weren't working out. But, you know, I was kind of doing my own thing. So I thought, you know, we were just going to hang out.
We saw Dumb and Dumber.
We went to Burger King.
And we went to Burger King. We were poor people.
Yeah. Oh, you know, I was in college. I had a fairly good job, but, you know.
And she paid for everything. I was a deadbeat first date.
Like I said, I thought I was just, you know, hanging out with.
I had no job. I had no money. My marriage is just falling apart. All of her friends were like, you are not going out with this loser, are you?
And these are all his friends,
They were all my friends, too. I thought. They're like, Drew, you got to get away from this guy. He's already married. He's already got a failed marriage and a kid and no money.
And to be honest, you know, I guess if I saw somebody doing that too, I'd be like, what the hell are you doing? But
probably, but you know, so we go out on this date, and this is before her friends went nuts on her. But yeah,
they didn't even know about that, I don't think.
And yes, she brought me home, and I was about to go inside, and I just decided to overcome my usual Cancerian hesitation, and I just gave her a kiss. She tells me that was when she became aware the whole thing had been a date. That was it. I guess she liked the kiss, and she came back for more.
You couldn't get rid of me from that point.
Right. You know, so there's the story. It's not exactly a typical story.
In some ways, it seems like we were kind of put together in the same places at the same time.
Doing the same things.
Yeah. And I guess when the time was right, the gods decided, hey, this is what you're doing. Hell, we even broke up at one point.
Broke up about 6 months, but that didn't work.
That didn't work.
That didn't work at all.
It's like, you pesky humans aren't going to interfere with this plan.
They actually, I think, did it for a reason, because that was during the time my grandmother had gotten cancer, and I went home and I took care of her.
Honestly, if we'd been together, I would have completely, because I've got, back in my day, they called it agoraphobia. Now they call it social stress anxiety, but I have a real hard time going out. You ever see the show Monk?
Yeah.
That show. He and, well, there were two different actresses that played his caretaker, but it always reminded us of our own relationship, because I couldn't go out without her. You know, I was non-functional without her. So I've gotten a lot better over the years, obviously.
It's a good thing, too, because this last year you'd have been
Oh, my God, yeah. But at that time, had we still been together, I would have just lost my whole... I just would have broken down if she had to go take care of her grandma. So it was probably better. I think the gods were going, okay, you guys need a little distance now so you can get some other stuff done.
But as soon as that was,
As soon as that was done, we're right back together.
Yep.
Didn't I see something on Facebook? I can't remember where one of you, I can't remember who posted this, was referencing like, hey, it's been so many years, and do you remember when we split money for a candy bar, or we couldn't afford a candy bar? What was that?
Oh, that's one of those little married couple end stories. It was back when we were first together.
Yeah, I mean, we had just moved in together.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, we were dirt poor. I mean, I think I was working by that point. I think I
you had just gotten a job. I was working.
And we were both working, but still, I mean, there was no money. I don't even know if we got paychecks yet. I
was 20 and you weren't quite 21.
Yeah, so... And the whole story is we were one day sitting in our car in front of a 7-Eleven, but I forget why we were there. And I was very upset because we were both really hungry and we didn't have enough money between us to go in and buy a candy bar.
You know, which back then was like, what, 69 cents, I think?
Something like that, 80 cents or something. Once we got, our feet under us and got ourselves together and started our lives a little better, I mean, we've been poor most of our lives, honestly. A lot of that has been more chosen poverty, if you know what I mean. We're pursuing other things rather than money. We at least got to the point where we were productive members of society and could pay our bills and that kind of thing. And once we got to that point, we got this thing where one of us would go out to the store for something and we would bring back a Snickers bar. Mm-hmm. It was just that one little thing that we could do that no one, even other people, living in the house with us, had no clue what that meant. We would always bring a candy bar to each other. It just represents that we're not there anymore. We actually overcame that, and now we can afford all the damn candy bars we want.
We do have, to that point, a listener question from Salem Jones here, who is saying, as a female practitioner, I'd like to know Carrie's magical background, history, and journey. Aaron, of course, is very well known, but for her, at least, Carrie wasn't as well known. So, Carrie, when were you first called? Which path drew you? And I guess to follow up on Salem's question, obviously Wicca, as you both mentioned, was a pretty big part. But was there anything, Carrie, where early on you felt a calling? Can you just talk about that to Salem's question?
Absolutely. For most of my life, I've been able to see spirits and things that weren't there. Growing up, even though they were kind of Church of Christ, Southern Baptist kind of folks, there was still this kind of undercurrent of believing in spirits, believing in, ghosts. And my grandmother always called it ESP. And she and I, kind of like me and Aaron, we didn't need to use a lot of words. We just kind of knew what was going on. There was also kind of to that strange point, them trying to tell me that I'm not seeing ghosts and this kind of thing. It was a very strange split between the two. But anyhow, it stuck with me. I remember finding a book my dad had called The Supernatural, and I started reading through it, and it's all very sensationalist stuff. I was like 8 or 9 years old whenever I found that book, and it had stuff about voodoo in it and several other cultural practices. And like I said, today we would find it very sensationalistic and not very good, but it was what I had at the time. It was one of those things that drew me. And as I kind of got older and, kind of started going out on my own and finding things to read and all, it was those kinds of things that drew me. And it's so funny, one of the very first magical books I picked up, I think I was like 14 or 15 maybe, was DJ Conway's Celtic Magic.
Didn't she just pass away?
Yeah, and she just recently passed away. But that was actually the first real book I can say that I picked up like that. And, I started working through some of it, and it was like...
There was 1990s era Llewellyn.
Yeah, very, very early, actually maybe even late 80s.
Yeah, yeah. Conway would have been 80s, yeah.
Yeah, because like I said, I was 14 or 15. I started working through that, and it was like, okay, there's got to be more. And I started going to the library, looking at more sources. I was very much into Arthurian legend at the time. I looked into Druidism. My dad actually even found, at the time, there was a grove up in Tallahassee, and they had shortly thereafter disbanded, but it was too far away from Orlando for me to even really get to at the time. So I had some explorations into Druidism, Wicca, and then eventually when Aaron and I got together, one of our early mentors, Oshani Lele, he had previously been in Wicca. He had started working with the ATRs and all.
Yeah, we actually knew Oshani when he first discovered Santori and Lukumi.
Aaron actually met him a couple of years before I did, but when I started talking to him and stuff, it was just, I loved him to death, and it was awesome getting to hang out with him and talk to him and learn from him. Went kind of deeper into some of those explorations and all. And even before that, when Aaron and I got together, I found Don Craig's book, and so I started working through that.
I worked overnights at the time. And she was into the pagan thing, and I was into the ceremonial thing, and we kind of figured that's just the way it was going to be. I would come home in the mornings, she'd be asleep. I started finding bookmarks through Don Craig's book. So I was like, what are you doing? And then you told me about this whole vision you had.
Yeah. So I was still kind of doing my own Druidism exploration, Wicca exploration, that kind of stuff. I was out doing laundry in the middle of the night one night. We were living in an apartment complex. And it was summer, so I was sitting out by the pool while I was waiting for the close. And I had a vision of Raphael. And he didn't even say anything. He just kind of showed up and was there. And I'm just going, what the hell is this? So it was after that I picked up Don Craig's book. And I'm like, okay, maybe I need to start looking into this. And so I was working through some of that, and then Raphael came one night and then brought Thoth. And again, nobody says anything. They're just standing there. I'm like, what on earth? What? But
they were just planting seeds.
They were, because I think it was maybe a year and a half after that is whenever I went into the Golden Dawn.
And there was a reason, too, because I don't know, have you ever read my essay? It's called A Discourse on the Enochian Watchtowers.
No, but I will. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, that's on my website, not my blog, but the tripod website, Kef777.
This one's tried to burn my brain out repeatedly.
Yeah, it was so early on. I guess Carrie had already been looking through Don Craig's book, so I already knew she had an interest in ceremonial magic. The Discourse on the Enochian Watchtowers is the only thing I've ever written that was handed to me by an angel. The whole thing. I've done some updating and editing on it, and I'm sure there's some of me in there. But the story of how that essay was written was I woke up one morning. You know how you just kind of lay there for a little bit? You're not really awake yet, but you're not asleep anymore. And I was just kind of in that little hazy state, and the essay came to me. All at once, every word of it exactly in its completed form in one heartbeat. I literally had to jump up out of bed and run to the computer and type it out as quickly as I could before I lost it. So that was a very important essay. I think it had a lot to do with some of the respect that I ended up gaining that, I'm an author now, why I got book contracts. I think it had something to do with why Chick wanted me to join the order. So that was a very important essay. I think Carrie got up and she saw me writing, and I had to tell her, no, can't talk, got to get this all out. And after that was done, I told her the experience I had had with that. And she said, well, that's really interesting, because at about the same time I would have been laying there, she was having a dream. And
a very vivid dream.
Very, very vivid dream. So it was really a vision. And an angel appeared. You didn't say it was a particular angel. You said it was an angel.
No, but I was in a library.
Oh, okay. You were in a library, and an angel appeared.
Yeah.
And he spoke one word, and that was it. That was the whole dream. He was gone.
No, I had a book in my hand, and it had characters in it I didn't understand, and some of them would light up.
I thought that was a different dream.
No, this was the same dream.
But he only said the one word.
There was one word, and even at the time, I didn't know what it was.
Yep. Oh,
I could not.
I remember the word.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, because it's actually why you joined the order. So he spoke one word to her, and I recognized when she told me this that what had happened was the angel had arrived to give me this information, and she had witnessed it. So the one word he spoke was him transmitting the information to me. So I guess in his language, that was all one word. That whole essay was one word. Well, but here's the problem. The word that he spoke in her dream was Beelzebub. And we pondered that for a while, and finally the answer came to us. At that point in her study and her career, she did not have the information in her brain to translate what the angel had said. She knew no angelical. She knew very little about ceremonial magic. She knew no Kabbalah.
No Hebrew.
No Greek. I mean, she knew Greek from high school, but she hadn't used that in any magical sense. Latin. No Greek. And this is what happens when people try to get personal gnosis from spirits. If you don't learn everything you can possibly learn, as much symbolism and as many words and as many concepts as you can, then you're hampering that spirit's ability to communicate with you. They can't say anything to you that you don't have the symbols in your mind to say. She was completely inexperienced in any of this stuff, so when the angel spoke, her brain just picked a word that sounded ceremonial to her and plugged it in. And we realized in that moment that if she was going to be a scryer for me and she was going to do all this ceremonial stuff, she was going to have to learn the language. And so before we did any real serious evocation work, she joined the order and made it into the inner order. And now she has all the Western Hermetic occult symbolism and language she needs, and that kind of glitch hasn't happened since.
And not only that, but, since then I've packed my brain through with all kinds of symbolism.
So that's what happened. In fact, we talked about it at the time. That's what happened to Aleister Crowley's Scarlet Women. He'd bring these women in who didn't know anything, and he would make them scry for him, and he would push them and push them and push them, and they had no filters, they had no protections, they hadn't, it was just raw scrying, and he would burn them out, and then he would dump them and go get another woman.
And that almost happened to me in another incident early on, too. I think I was maybe in Zellator at the time.
And the angels came down with a vision, and they wanted to proceed. They didn't care if it was too much for her or not. But
unfortunately, Aaron and another person that was there had the wherewithal to shut it down. But that one, I think shortly thereafter, I laid down, and I slept for like 10 or 12 hours after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could feel it. And in the early days, and I don't know if anyone else has ever really experienced this, especially with Enochian, whenever he would do Enochian work and he would start, speaking the language and stuff. And it happened to me at other times, too. The only way I can describe it is like concrete blocks moving. Have you ever played those block switch games where you have to fill in the spaces and moving them around? You used to have them like little plastic games for kids. Like concrete blocks moving like that and trying to fill in spaces and stuff. And
it was very grinding.
It was a
sensation.
It was almost like I could physically feel this grinding sensation.
That always fascinated me because if you read Dee's journals, Kelly used to complain that he could feel them moving around in his head.
Yeah.
And it was a very unpleasant feeling.
Now, as I got more experienced and moved forward in my practice and stuff, that kind of thing doesn't really happen anymore. But early on, I could feel it was like they were moving things around to set up my brain. my
I got that sensation on it. It wasn't like concrete or anything, but there were a lot of times, especially early on, where I would be doing my Abra-Melin work every Sunday, and I could feel her actually reaching in and moving things around in my head. And it was, you can tell they're actually rewiring things in there. Yeah. It's a very...
The sensation's probably different for other...
And a lot of people, this is going back to our experience with the Golden Dawn, a lot of people, us included especially, but we see it in other initiates. As you get closer and closer to an upcoming initiation, you'll start getting headaches.
Yeah.
Because again, they're actually rewiring things in your head. On a physical level, the actual neurons and stuff, you're getting as you learn this new material, you are actually forging new connections between your brain cells that weren't there before. So, things do get rewired.
That's kind of how I started. And, as things moved on and, we started really working Solomonic, that wasn't really done, I guess, with any real intention. It just happened that we worked together like that. I don't think there was ever any real
honestly,
discussion.
There really wasn't, because again, it's like the gods just maneuvered us together. I'm a natural exorcist. I say exorcist, summoner, conjurer. I call them and they come. I'm like Dee. I'm not really wired for scrying. I'm not saying I've never had visions. I'm not saying that I've never seen the spirits, but it's not a usual thing for me. Whenever I have a vision or see something, it's kind of significant to me. Whereas she's seeing stuff all the damn time. So it was just kind of a natural pairing. It was like Dee and Kelly all over again.
There's 2 listener questions here that I think hit on that. I'll just ask both of them at the same time. Brett A. Welshmeyer is asking, if it's not too personal, I'd love to know how Aaron and Carrie grew to working together in the magical system. Who started the conversation first, so to speak? Saying my other half knows some of what I do, but not all. So who's curious in terms of who spilled the beans first? And then Bridget Imblock Wamba asks, my question is along the lines of Brett's question, but a little bit different, wanting to know, to what extent have both of you influenced one another on different types of magic to consistently practice? So just to kind of sum up those questions, like, when was like the first actual Solomonic working, or what to each of you sticks out as like the first memory that you have in terms of actually working together with a very specific magical goal?
I honestly don't know if we have an answer to that, because like you've heard in our stories so far, all of this just kind of grew organically and naturally. I mean, I can't really think of a time that from the questions, it sounds like people are thinking that we met and revealed to each other what we do, and but it wasn't really like that. It was, other than that one conversation where you walked out and wouldn't answer me about Wicca. But past that, everything's just kind of, like, for instance, I was friends with Oshani Lele, and I had been friends with him. I met him actually because when I came back to Orlando, this is before Carrie and I started hanging out. In fact, my marriage hadn't even broken down yet. Actually, it just started. It was right at the beginning of my marriage. I had called Dragon's Wood because, like I said, it was the only pagan store in town. And I introduced myself as a Kabbalistic witch because I was the only Wiccan that I knew that was into the Kabbalah. And at that time, I don't know if you recall, but at that time, if you were hanging around Wiccans, you didn't really talk about ceremonial magic. You didn't wear crosses. That was all Bible stuff. You don't do that, So I said, this is going to sound strange, but I'm a Kabbalistic witch, and the lady, her name was Hillary, and she said, oh, you need to talk to Stu. And I think she gave me his number. So I called this number, and this real flamboyant guy answers and says, are you Stuart Myers? Yeah, I'll introduce myself. And I said, I am a Kabbalistic witch. And he goes, oh, let me get my cigarette, and drops the phone. And he's gone for a minute, and he comes back, and he picks up the phone, and he's just so exuberant. And he was right in the middle of writing Between the Worlds at the time, which is a book about a blending of Wicca and Kabbalah. Traditional. He was a British traditional Wiccan, by the way. He came down through Lady Sheba's line. So he was blending all this British traditional Wicca with, basically, Kabbalah is already there because Gardner was into that stuff too. But he was really focusing in on it and drawing it out and making it more prominent. Like he was putting God and goddess forms on the tree of life and that kind of stuff. It was real. This is the 90s we're talking about, and that was kind of a thing back then. Maybe a year later or so, I guess, is when he discovered Santeria and was reading his first books on it, and he was just so impressed. Actually, he had found Palo Mayombe, and he was just so impressed with how similar Palo was to the traditional witchcraft he had learned. So he was exploring that and real excited about it. That's when Carrie and I started hanging out together. And I was like, oh, you got to meet my friend Stu. So she met Stu, and that was right. Actually, he left right after that because he went out west.
I met him after he came back.
Was it after he came back?
Yeah.
I thought it was just before he left. When he went out west, that's where he got his initiations and started his path in earnest. And he came back, and I guess that's when I introduced him to you.
Yeah.
So I was already talking to Stu, and you've heard me tell this story where I would go to him, and he was working at a gas station. I was working in overnight security, so I'd get off in the middle of the night, like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I would go hang out with him. And so I was just soaking up everything I could learn from him that he was learning about Santeria, like I said, it should be called Lakumi, and about Palo Mayombe. And I was fascinated with how similar the stuff he was saying was to the grimoires. So I was soaking up everything I could, and that's when I introduced the two of them. And she felt a lot more called to the actual African deities than I did. I was just learning everything I could so I could apply it and actually make sense out of what the grimoires were saying. But she was actually going in, he became her godbrother, and she has a Ganga, and, she did that whole thing. Well, and then to continue that story, to get back to the question, once she got into Palo, that increased my exposure to those traditions. You know, it's one thing just going to a gas station and talking a guy's ear off all night, or actually letting him talk my ear off as much as I could get him to.
So that was one way I influenced you.
Right. It's another thing, though, when your girlfriend at the time, but your wife actually joins that tradition, and now you're living in it. You're actually, you know, I'm watching her put this stuff together, and I'm watching her work with her spirits, and this is really informing me. And even in the years since, like a good example would be, she got into her ancestors. You know, ancestor work is always, it's like the first thing you do in the African traditions is you set up your boveda and get connected to your ancestors. And she had, but something happened, and I'll let her tell that part of the story, but something happened and clicked with her where she just went whole hog. And I mean, she set up this beautiful shrine and was starting to work with them and get like massive results out of the work with them. And that is what kickstarted me. For all the years that my guardian angel had told me, no, you're not allowed to work with the lesser spirits yet. You don't know enough yet, you know. It was when she started working with her ancestral spirits that my familiars started standing up and going, okay, now it's time. We need to start doing this. And my guardian angel went, oh, okay, I guess it's fine now. You know, she gave me this begrudging permission. I guess you can work with them. You know, it's going to take time away from me, but I guess you can do it. So she let me work with them. So her work often kicks me off, and then vice versa. I'll be really heavily involved in some project, and that kicks her off. So that's the way our influence has been with each other, but it's always been kind of a parallel journey. It hasn't been like, you know, when did the conversation start? When was your first work together? We didn't have that. We've always been together. You know, we've known each other since high school. We've been occultists together since college. I couldn't tell you honestly when the first ritual was.
Because that's, you know, again, kind of going back, it's just the way we live our lives. This is what we do. I'm trying to pick out of my brain where the first...
I mean, we did Wicca stuff together. Yeah. We've done tons and tons of Golden Dawn work together, and the Solomonic stuff has just kind of come in and been part of that. But I really couldn't tell you. There's nothing in our memories or journals that say, this is our first working together. Yeah. We're going to see how this goes. You know? No, it's just always been that way.
But for all of that, we also do... For all the magical work we do together, we also do maintain some separate practices too.
Yep. She's still, I mean, I'm not in Apollo. She still has that practice.
I still have that. I still work heavily with my ancestors. You know, as far as my personal work goes, they have been just, I've never seen anything like it. You know, I've heard lots of stories of, you know, folks, ancestors working for them and stuff, but...
Yeah, we've seen some incredible results.
Yeah.
She's not in there doing a Solomonic boveda, and, you know, right? We don't make Wiccan Solomon ceremonies, or, you know...
No, I go in, I work with them...
We don't blend Golden Dawn with our Solomonic work, you know? They're all separate traditions.
I work with them in the manner in which I was taught, which is, you know, very influenced by... Palomayombe, Lukumi, Santhria, whatever, the ATRs. But they have also taught me things themselves about what they want, how they work, spells they've given me, just all kinds of stuff. Like whenever I'm doing personal work for like a personal goal, which always ends up benefiting everybody else too, but I kind of do a several layer thing where, you know, I'll work with the angels either through the Solomonic system, like with our altars, you know, lighting candles to them or whatever. Sometimes Golden Dawn work, almost always I would start with that higher part of it. And then I start kind of working my way down, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, you gotta see her. When an emergency happens around here, she lights the whole place up. All 7 archangels get candles and offerings and herbal waters and stuff. And then once that's done, she goes in there to her ancestors and gets all that lit up through those traditions. And then she goes out to the front porch where she keeps her prenda, and she's got that lit up, and she's working with it. But, you know, they're all their separate things. Even though she's using them all together, she's not blending the traditions or trying to make, you know, some kind of hybrid, you know.
Each one is its own separate act.
Yeah.
And the way that I look at it, it's like each one opens a separate gate. Like you open the gates to the heavens, then you open the gates to the earth, and then you open the gates to the underworld. In a visual aspect, it is like opening gates and drawing down this light and having everybody kind of work together.
And they do.
And they do.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I see so many people who want there to be some kind of universal theory for magic. It all has to fit together, and it all has to be explained by one theory.
No, it doesn't.
And it really doesn't. These spirits are from entirely disparate traditions with their own specific rituals and ways of going about things, but they all live here, and they all know each other, and they all work together, and it's not a problem.
And whenever I first started out, one of the reasons I was told to set up the Bovida was through a reading, which was very interesting. And they were very active. It was through a OB divination, which is you use 4 pieces of coconut to ask the spirits questions. I forget now how the question was phrased, but it was about me working with my ancestors. And one of the pieces of coconut went, just flying. We never even found that piece because this was outside. And he stopped. He was like, yeah. And there were several questions that followed it, but I was told then that they were going to be a powerful source for me. And after having worked with them over the last, 20-something years, and especially because I had kind of gotten away from the
4 or 5, I guess.
Yeah, it was around the time we started Doc Solomon's.
Yep.
And I had actually kind of, I don't want to say taken a break, but my practice had really suffered a lot because I'd been sick.
Yeah.
There was a point where I was barely able to walk and move and stuff. And once I found out what was going on and got past that, it was like, in my mind, it offered me kind of a new lease on life. And it was kind of like another beginning. And at that point,
2015 was a hell of a year.
It really was.
We launched Doc Sols in 2015.
Yep.
You finally
I started that process
healed.
just before that.
You were finally healed in 2015.
It took 3 years for me to really get back to
Right, but you started then.
Yeah.
We got married in 2015. So it's like 2015 was just like the start of a whole new thing for us.
So, it was beginning in spring of that year. Actually, just before spring. It was just before my birthday because it was kind of a really neat sign that had happened. I had gotten my Bovida all set back up and cleaned up, and everybody was happy. I had started, and this was maybe a couple of months into, I started walking. I'd get up every morning, and it was...
Because you could after almost 10 years.
Yeah, and in the beginning it was kind of a form of exercise / meditation. That has actually grown into a very large part of my practice. Mm-hmm. Because it gets me out in nature, and I go out in the swamps and talk to all these spirits and stuff, and it's awesome.
And they were talking back.
Well, I'd started that process just after Christmas of 2014. And by my birthday, which is the beginning of March, I went out the morning of my birthday, and I had gone in and talked to my ancestors, and I was feeling really good, and I went out. I found, I think it was like $35 or something, just laying in the middle of the sidewalk. And I'm looking around. There's nobody around. There's nobody that, I'm like, who could have dropped this? Because this is an area where I don't want to take people's money if they need it, And I was just like, holy hell. And I did kind of look around for a while trying to find but I was like, okay, well, I guess it's mine. It was a relation to my granddad because we were very close, and he would always give me money for my birthday and stuff. And it was just them saying happy birthday to me. So I continued on my way, and the Hillsborough River is about, a mile or so from us. I continued on down there, and there are gators down in that river, but it's a little unusual to see them. Well, I go down, and there's a big old gator laying on the dock down there. The gators are sacred to one of my spirits. And to see all of that on my birthday, and I knew things were really starting to kick in. That was the day I also found I had gone down in this real swampy area next to the river, and I was exploring, and I found a safe that looked like it had been blown open. And I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? Because I'm always looking for signs, for omens, things like that. It's one of the ways that they can communicate with me, and they send me a lot of messages that way. And I saw that, and I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? And it was no joke. The process that I was starting there really did blow some things open. And the progress and the things that I've seen since then are just astonishing. And there's been some long processes, some goals that I had been working on for the past 4 years that I'd been talking to my ancestors, talking to my spirits. These are things that I need and I want to, not only help along our own practice, but also to help the wider community. And I'll be damned if all of that is not now starting to fall into place.
Yep.
And I asked for some really big things.
Yeah.
For some really big things. And to say that they have come through would be
an understatement.
Yeah, it would be an absolute understatement. So as much as the last year was about change, this year is too, but it's a whole different level.
I mean, this spring, we're probably, we're definitely going to be moving to a bigger place because the business has literally outgrown the house we're in.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I can't say I'm surprised, but
well,
wow.
It's funny. It started out as what we called the Doxal shelf. It was a little shelf in the temple. And it had a few jars of incense and consecrated chalk and the other stuff, stuff we were selling. And it was cute. And it made us a little bit of extra money here and there during the month. And then it got bigger and bigger until it started to choke out the temple. It's like, well, we can't choke out our temple. So it kind of exploded into our bedroom. And I installed shelves in the bedroom. And I moved anything that wasn't consecrated, tools and ingredients and stuff, into the bedroom. And I left just the consecrated stuff in the temple. And then it ended up exploding out of there, and we've commandeered an entire bedroom of the house that is now
for shipping
and sewing. And now it's exploding out of that room, and it has literally nowhere to explode to.
So, yeah, the next few months we're going to be expanding again.
I literally don't have room to make enough novena candles to keep in stock. Customers are ordering novena candles, and I'm like, okay, I'll have those ready, once the moon waxes again, because I don't have shelves around here even strong enough to hold that many novena candles.
Yeah. The next few months, I'd say over the next, because we're hoping to get this process started pretty soon, because like you said, I mean, the roof's going to end up popping off this place soon. Doc Solomon's is going to go through an expansion.
And if we can get a big enough place, we're even thinking about hosting local pagan festivals on our land. If we can do this, and if we decide that the insurance and other hassles are worth it to hold the festivals, our property is going to be kind of a center of pagan and occult activity at least for Florida.
Adam J. Pearson is asking and saying many couples would dread the idea of working together in a business, assuming they'd soon be at each other's throats. So how do Aaron and Carrie, how do you both navigate the challenges and possible tensions imposed by working together in a business like Doc Solomon's? And to that question, a question from Annalise Antoinette, who's saying, with Doc Solomon's being so successful since its launch nearly 4 years ago, is there anything either of you would have done differently if you knew starting off what you know now about running a specialty magical business?
Well, again, it's kind of one of those things that has just really evolved, because Aaron worked overnight for years. We went through long periods where, we didn't see each other a lot, but a lot of times I would actually make dinner or whatever, and I'd go out and take it to him, and we'd hang out for a few hours. But as far as working together, I love it, and I think he does too, because we've always gotten along so well. Not to say that we don't argue and get on each other's nerves occasionally, but
we are one of those rare married couples that actually hold your horses like each other.
Oh yeah.
What?
Yeah. Like people. If I'm understanding the perspective of that question, like I could imagine us working at a job, a 9-to-5 job somewhere, and us working together there and then having to come home and be together. I could actually see that being real tiring. I could see why couples would end up really getting on each other's nerves that way. But that's not really the way we're structured. Well, as you know, and we've talked about, I actually have retired from the Muggle world. Carrie kind of unofficially retired from the Muggle world basically when Annie was born. She's been a stay-at-home mom. It's not like you're going to a 9-to-5 job. You get up, there's stuff to do, you do it. We work together to get it done. And at the end of the day, hopefully you've got enough done to do the whole thing again tomorrow. So it's not really I'm going to work and having to face this person mindset, if that makes sense.
It just seems like there's a very organic kind of natural flow there.
There really is, and we're lucky. And I wish I could give advice to, the listeners, the couples out there, and, this is what you need to do to make it work. And I don't really know if we have that advice because our situation is so rare, and we came to it in such a, the gods pushed us here kicking and screaming. I mean, whether we wanted to or not. So it's not like we're such genius people that we figured it all out and made it work. We didn't have a choice. So
honestly,
we got lucky as far as having each other.
That's what I was going to say. It's like we really lucked out.
What did it feel like to finally bid, at least economically, the Muggle world adieu? Was it scary? Was it a little intimidating? Did it feel good? I mean, Aaron, for example, working overnights, this is something that I believe ever since you undertook the Abra-Melin ritual decades ago, that this is something that you've been engaged in. And I mean, that's a big change. How did that feel?
Well, basically you're right on all points. It was exhilarating. It was frightening. It's still frightening.
Yeah.
You don't have that guaranteed paycheck. I was a little fortunate. It's hard to say this. It's weird to call this fortunate. Basically, my boss really tried to screw me over. I did auditing for a hotel. It was an overnight. They close down, and I go in and balance the books and get everything ready, and I transfer the business over to the next business day, if that makes sense. My hotel was sold. Actually, it was sold a couple of times. I ended up being the employee there with the most seniority, and I had seen like 3 or 4 different owners, and it was amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And by the time this final owner got the place, I was the last guy there. Actually, there was one girl there who had kind of come in during all that changeover, and she had been there the second longest, and she got fed up with him and quit. So I was the last guy there. And because I worked overnights, I didn't actually have to be there with them all day, so they weren't able to get on my nerves. And there might have been some boss fix oil involved there. They were cutting down my hours anyway. And they were trying to get me to leave because they were paying me way more per hour than they could have paid anybody else coming in off the street. So they really wanted me to go. But they, for some reason, weren't willing to just fire me or couldn't find a good reason to fire me. So I hung on there and I watched them. I was full-time, and then I was down to 4 days, then 3 days, then 2 days.
You were on 2 days for...
And what happened is when they cut me down to 3 and 2 days, my first instinct was I need to come up here during the day and stand face-to-face with this guy and tell him, hey, I got a family to feed here. One of my spirits actually said to me, it was fairly audible, actually. It was like, no, you're going to need the time. Don't say anything. That was literally just a few weeks. I think we released the first Solomonic class right after that. And the business just took off like gangbusters. And my spirit had been right. I would not have had time to work a full-time job. I hung on with those 2 days. I was kind of doing it to spite them a little bit. It's like, okay, so at this point, I'm not your full-time auditor. I'm your relief auditor. I'm now the 2-day-a-week guy. But you're paying me exorbitant prices for a relief auditor, and I'm going to make you pay it. I held on to that piddly 2-day-a-week job, and it wasn't bringing in much, but it helped. Finally, the business got to the point where even those 2 days were starting to hurt the business. It was like I had stuff to do, but now I got to put it all down and go sit at this job for 8 stupid hours.
And fortunately, and that was through my ancestors, because we've been planning on that for a while.
We figured it would be maybe another 5 years, 3 to 5 years, and it ended up being like 1.
But there again, that was really made possible because of some work my ancestors did.
Yes, there's some other things that happened that I won't go into, but it accelerated things. It was fun. It was fun going in there. I remember I just told Carrie this the other day, because you're there overnight, you're the only one there, so you have to deal with anyone who comes up, to the night window, anyone who calls, and because you're the overnight guy, you don't have access to anything. It's just you're just sitting in there doing, balancing books and running programs and doing math. So they come up, they think you're hotel housekeeping or maintenance, and they want you to fix this and get them that and give them this, and you're like, I can't help you. You need to come up here when the hotel people are here. I don't have access to X, Y, and Z. And man, that makes them mad. And I spent years being just yelled at and cursed at and being called horrible names and everything. And I tell you what, it was the last person that did that to me. I knew my last day was 2 days from that moment. It was literally on my last week there. And I had already given notice and everything. So everyone knew I was quitting. And I let that lady have it. Oh my gosh, she said something rude to me, and you know those scenes in, like, you ever see Half Baked? F you, I'm at it. It just felt so good. And then of course that last day, the very last day.
Which was right before the New Year, so you actually, for the first time in years, got to be home for New Year's Eve.
Clocked out, and that feeling of walking out and said, see you later on the flip side, and never looking back, and that was incredible.
Yep.
Scary, but incredible. But again, only partially scary, because by that point I was only letting go of a part-time 2-day-a-week job. But it was still scary. I mean,
the Capricorning, you did not want to let that
go. And the idea of living in this world, as chaotic and screwed up as it is, with no safety net, it's us and this incredible community that we found. I mean, I'm still just floored. I said there's no community support for Solomonic magic, but I think that might be something I should put in the past tense, because we saw, Oshani Lele, and we had a lot of interaction with the ATR community at large. We met a lot of people, and we saw a lot of things. And one thing that influenced us was the way they served their communities. They were real shamans. There were people who had problems and fears and sickness. It doesn't matter if this is medieval Europe or not. What people need in their day-to-day lives really hasn't changed. And a Santo... Some people don't understand why I use the word Santo. It might just be specific to Oshani's house, but they use the word Santo. It means saint. It means you've been crowned. You are a priest. So anyone can be a Santero. I don't mean anyone. If you're an initiate, you're a Santero. But a Santo has been crowned. So a Santo actually provides services to an actual community. It's a living and breathing tradition. Since we founded Doc Sol's, and I guess maybe even a little before that, it's kind of amazed us that our own Western community is so starving for those kinds of services. Apparently there always was a community out there that wanted the kind of things that we offer. And it's even shocked us, that there's enough of a community that we cannot work mundane jobs and just have this community support us through the services and the products that we offer. It's kind of amazing. I don't even know if we could have done this with Golden Dawn stuff. And from what I understand, Chick and Tabitha are having great success even with their shop. I don't really know what to make of it, but I'm really floored that there's that many people out there that are so appreciative of what we offer. So that's a big part of why I was willing to finally just tell the job, hey, people need us. I don't have time to sit here for 8 hours and help make you rich. I got to go.
Yeah.
I got to go serve some people, So that's what really makes it worthwhile.
And that's something that just Doc Solomon's would not be what it is or where it is at this point without the support of the community at large.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, it's not just Solomonic practitioners that come to us.
Aaron and Carrie, to that point, there was another question from Annalise Antoinette about, with Doc Solomon's, as you just both mentioned, being so successful and having this great community, is there anything you two would have done differently if you knew starting off what you know now about running a very, niche, specialty, magical business?
I don't know if there's any, action I took I would do differently necessarily. I don't think I've learned anything other than just being shocked at how big the community is. I don't think there's anything that I specifically did with the business that I would want to change. I can tell you one thing. I'd really like the truck not to have blown up right when we started the business.
But that wasn't something that we did.
Yeah, that was another, in 2015, I just founded the business and announced it and, made a big deal of it. And our truck blew up and it cost us
$1,200.
$1,200 to get the stupid thing fixed. And it just set the whole business back, at least
we were
6
really
months
worried.
Or so. We were really worried. This is even a little later. We had gotten to the point where the business was okay, but I was really getting worried about being able to afford new ingredients, like ingredients for incenses and the oils and stuff that we need to put in our products, or buying parchment. Or buying lignum aloes. I mean, these are ridiculously expensive ingredients. I think that was the first when I released the classes. Yeah. So I honestly think if I were to do anything differently, I would have come on the idea of releasing those classes a lot earlier than I did. I actually had people really bugging me for a long time, like every time they see me.
Several years.
When are you going to teach Solomonic magic online? And I kept saying no because I was like, I don't understand how you would make this into a class. This is shamanism. This is something you're supposed to learn to do as you do it. And, ask questions and be provided the answers. That's how I did it. I would get to something in the grimoires and this doesn't make sense. And I would go to a shani and he'd go, oh, yeah, we did the same thing in our tradition. And here's why, and then, okay, well, that makes sense. And then I would go and be able to do the grimoire work. So it was very difficult for me to even conceive of putting that into a class. All right, everyone, take out Secrets of the Grimoires and turn to chapter 3. It didn't make sense to me. You already had Secrets of the Grimoires. Why do you need to pay me to sit here and blather at you, to tell you what's already written? But obviously I figured it out. I figured out a lot of material and stuff to include. But the point being, to get back to the original thing, the only thing I can think that I would do differently is I wouldn't have hemmed and hawed over that for as long. And I think if I hadn't, we'd probably have more classes. We'd probably have the 102 material now.
Yeah.
The Abra-Melin course could have come maybe a year earlier, and we would be further ahead in the business. But that's the only thing I can think. It's not like we learned anything about our customers or people or our manner of doing business that we went, oops, that was wrong. We shouldn't have done. I try to be very careful with pricing. We get hounded by certain friends of ours who want us to up our prices. You're not charging enough. You're not charging enough. We like it that way. It's already expensive, and we're not trying to price ourselves out of everyone's range. I mean, we started when we couldn't afford a candy bar.
Yeah.
And I can't look
and we understand.
Yeah, I can't look at someone in that position and say, well, you can't, sorry, you can't even afford a candy bar, then you don't need to be learning magic. That's not right.
That's why you learn magic, is to try to work yourself.
Chicken Tabitha, on that point, we do have dues we pay to temple just for the maintaining of the temple. But there's been many, many times, probably more often than I'd like to admit, that we haven't been able to put anything in the dues box. And neither one of the two of them have ever even so much as mentioned it to us. We're in a community of people. We don't turn people away because of money, and we don't overprice our products just because we know we can get you to, cough up a little bit more because we're the only ones that provide it. And so I've tried to stay on that path.
Yeah, and we've really tried to make things as accessible to people as possible.
Accessible, and also getting the rare stuff that you can't find anywhere else, because that's one of the big barriers to Solomonic magic, and being able to consecrate it. And all of our customers know and trust, and we provide pictures and videos when we can and such, that yes, we are following the instructions. We're following the timing. We are doing everything exactly right. This isn't like, we bring in all the all the incense, and I go, I'm in, done, and then sell it to you. I actually perform the rituals, and I actually say the psalms and the prayers and the holy water and the incense.
But to that point too, I think,
and our customers trust that, so I'm happy with that. Oh, go ahead.
And kind of like with our own relationship and how we're able to work with Doc Solomon's and stuff, we like each other, but to that point too, we love what we do. We absolutely love what we do.
And we push each other too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times the last thing she wants to do is give another tarot reading, but it's like, no, come on, this lady's been waiting a week. You got it. Come on, you got to do it. I told her you're going to do it today. You got to do it. And then she gets mad at me. Oh, why did you tell her that? Well, you got to get it over with. And then the same way, like I said, when she's doing things, it'll push me, and so we kind of pick up each other's slack. But
we love what we do, and
there's not much other than doing things earlier than we've done on some things, not dragging our feet. We got several new products. Like, we want to introduce a whole line of elemental stuff, with the 4 archangels instead of the 7. So, fire spell kits and talismans and all, and novena candles, and for, water and earth and air and fire. So, but we've been dragging our feet because other stuff has been going on in our lives that has kind of derailed some of these plans. We would like to do more faster. We'd like to do more faster. That's the main thing.
But I do think that's coming once we get things once the dust kind of settles.
Yeah, this year we do plan to
I think the second half of this year is going to be
pretty big,
pretty impressive.
More classes,
and we'll have a lot more time to work on things, and we will that will be our sole focus at that point.
Listeners, obviously, if you haven't done this already, both Aaron and Carrie have some really cool videos as well, I believe, on the Doc Solomon's Facebook page and on YouTube, I think, where it goes back to that issue of trust. Like, for instance, I know, Aaron, there is the video that you did of a consecration of a batch of Solomonic holy water and reading the 5 Psalms and putting in the salt and pronouncing the words with the Mather's Key of Solomon. And then, Carrie, I know there's a video as well of kind of like a family outing that you lead, collecting solar plants and things like that. Can you guys talk about, because I know people are like, I love those live videos. Like, did one of you have an idea to do that, or did that kind of just evolve organically too? Because I think people love those kind of live consecratory videos.
They do.
Yeah, those are actually my fault. I came up with that idea. Aside from all the occultism, I don't even know how many people really know about it, but I'm kind of into technology. I do 3D construction, virtual reality type stuff. I play virtual reality a lot in my copious spare time. You know that I'm very into social media, blogging, keeping people interested. Facebook especially is our main source. Now maybe if Facebook fell apart, we might survive. It would be a major hit to us. But in the beginning, especially without Facebook, I don't even know if this could have happened. I mean, that's been our major advertising tool with the Solomonic group and the classes. The groups for the classes are on Facebook, so it's very important to us. And knowing how to navigate social media and keep people interested is something that I study and know a lot about. So I came up with the idea of putting us on camera. And I started with that Solomonic water consecration. Then I did instructions for magical hours. And then I thought people would like to see all of us out gathering plants. And we're always trying to come up with some idea for a new video. I'm trying not to make things too repetitive. I do have plans to, the candle offering services that we do. I'm actually going to perform one of those, probably not a real one, but it'll just be kind of a generic one for show. But I'll actually offer a candle to one of our archangels, and you'll get to see the rituals that I actually perform to do that and see the whole process. So
I had some people ask me about filming the walks that I take and the kind of stuff that I do out in nature.
She did that once.
I've done it a couple of times now, and I've done some live Facebook videos and stuff too.
Yeah, she's actually done more of those than I have. She'll pop open the live feed and just... Because I need to do more of that, actually.
I see so much out in nature and so many spirits that talk, and, and it's also a very meditative process, so I get a lot of messages whenever I'm out doing that kind of work. A lot of that really has to be done in the moment, because I like to show, what is triggering this, why is this going on. Unfortunately, my phone currently doesn't have enough memory to record videos and be able to
and upload
do the editing and stuff. But
do the live.
But either way, people really seem to enjoy, seeing the rituals and how we go out and collect the plants, and
we love illustrating to people. We have that hashtag, the magical life. One thing that we really set out from in the beginning, and this is aside from Doc Sol's or social media, just for ourselves. And a lot of this has to do with that ATR influence, We would go and visit our friends who are practicing these religions. And if you go to a Wiccan's house or a Golden Donner's house, they may have decorations up, but most of the work that they do might just be off in a room somewhere. It's kind of put away. It's out of sight. It's relegated to something that would be more definable as a hobby. Whereas you go into some of these old magic households, and there's this spirit who has to live right next to the door, and there's always a lit candle on his little altar, and then over here is the Bovida, and they have to be right there, and there's candles and glasses of water on their altar, and there's rituals that have to be done at both places, at certain times, and there's this altar over here and that one, and the whole house is just this living spiritual center, and there are things that have to be done to feed and care for and maintain all of these relationships and all of these spirits. And we recognized very early on that was the difference. That was right there, the illustration of the difference between why when, say, a voodoo priest says, I'm going to do this, and he goes and does his ritual, and bam, it's like lightning, and it works. And then maybe a Wiccan or a Golden Donner might say, well, I'm going to try to make this happen. And, well, maybe it happens. Or maybe something else happens that they can kind of retroactively interpret as being what they wanted. Or maybe it was all just an interchange of their perception, and it was all just psychic. You see what I'm saying? And we saw the difference between the hobby mindset and the living tradition. And so we set out to create that here, and that's why we have all of these altars, and we've learned that even in the Western traditions, there are certain places in the house they're supposed to go, and there are certain rituals you have to perform to maintain the relationships and to maintain the altars, and it's all there. It's all in the West. We had this whole discussion on another show about cultural appropriation, but I'll be honest with you, as much as we've learned from other cultures, what I've learned is there's no need for cultural appropriation. It all exists in our own Western texts. It's in Agrippa. It's in the Key of Solomon. It's in the fourth book. It's in all these old texts, and the things that we're starting to discover as more and more texts are discovered and translated. And it's really amazing that we're not lacking in our culture for these traditions. We've just kind of hidden them away.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've tried to do, is revive a serious old magic tradition.
To kind of that point in our Western culture, I've noticed a lot of people, for various reasons, either it be out of necessity from their job or whatever, people coming into their house, a lot of people are still very, I don't want to say afraid, but, there's a lot of people that either can't or are not comfortable with having various magical accoutrements.
Out
visible.
where other people can see them, yeah. Yeah, that can be a problem.
But for us, it's all over the house. Even to the outside.
Even on the porch.
Spirits. Yeah.
Gabriel's altar is on the porch because he watches over the garden.
Bast
and Sekhmet are out there. You guys never hear us talk about our Egyptian altars, but we've got those too. And her Prinda, her Ganga spirit, lives out there.
Yep.
That goes back to the whole thing about how surprised I am that there really is a community that has been wanting services like this. It's one thing to go, to your local, well, if you're lucky enough to have, we live in Florida, so we have,
there's botanicas everywhere.
I was spacing the word botanica. But yeah, we have botanica, you can go to your local botanica if you're lucky to have one, but at the same time, you never know. Good chance you can get ripped off. In that culture, there's a lot of fraud, and I have to counsel people almost every day who get caught up in someone who's like, oh, you're cursed. They're always going to tell you you're cursed, and so you need to come back. You've paid for this cleansing, but you're cursed, so come back and pay me $400. And then, well, thanks for the $400. I've done this ritual, but the spirits now tell me you also need this because there's another curse, and this one's going to be $1,000. And then after that curse is broken, well, now we've discovered another layer, and there's a whole bigger ancestral curse, and that's going to cost you $5,000 to fix. And I actually have to counsel people to get the hell out of there, Make it clear, I'm not painting the whole community with that brush, but it is a problem that community faces, is getting the criminals out. And so it's interesting that here we are in this Western community who have had to resort to leaving the Western culture and going to a Santero or trying to think of some of the other very common, like in Candomblé and stuff like that, where you go for readings and cleansings and such. And I think people are reacting to the fact that here we are as Westerners, and we're dealing with Western spirits, and we're dealing with Western systems, and we can give them a Western perspective and Western answers, and I think they're responding to that. And that's just my speculation, but it just seems like there's a lot of people out there who want what we do. And if we're the only people providing it, or who have provided it, at least in the last 400 years or so, then where are these people coming from, and where were they going beforehand,
Let's talk a little bit to that point about how this is a family business and about your daughter. We had a couple of questions about that as well. For instance, Morgan Marquez asks, quote, I'm a parent, and I'd be interested in hearing Carrie and Aaron talk about how they are parents and magicians. They do quite a lot of work in their house. How do they talk about their work when out and about and as a family in Florida? Are you completely open or a bit discreet when out in public? Also, Morgan says, I don't expect them to reveal what spiritual protections they use in relation to their daughter, but if Carrie and Aaron could talk about some of the guides, entities, and angels who have helped shield her, that would be really interesting since I often pursue my practice in my home as well. So that's a question from Morgan.
Oh, wow.
Well, actually, there's an interesting segue there because I was just talking about how we are so Western. And that puts us in a unique position because we actually have a little more leeway to be open about what we do. Because when we talk about it, we're talking about archangels and we're talking about all these, and of course I'm an ordained priest. So I'm talking about priestly things. And even if they ask, oh, what do you do? I'm a priest. So we kind of get away with a lot. Oh, you're a priest. And then they can just kind of tune us out, So it's really not that big a deal. We are somewhat discreet. I mean, we don't go out, well, we did when we were kids, but we don't go out, to actually screw with people, in elaborate dress or makeup or, walking down the street with big staffs or carrying our swords. We're not like that. Out and about, we just look like typical Gen Xers. But Carrie, I think, has a couple of stories because there have been times when, even though we're free with talking about archangels and the prayers and the rituals we do with our archangels and such, there are things we don't want blurted out.
Especially in certain contexts.
When you have a little kid who's been raised in this stuff, it's like water to a fish to her. She doesn't even realize other people don't do this.
Yeah. Going back, whenever she came along, we were already obviously very heavily involved in magic. And, for a while we did kind of contemplate, trying to keep her separated from that. Or, if she showed interest one day,
Oh yeah, we don't ever do anything to indoctrinate her or anything. The most she's actually done actively, well, she's done a lot actively, but it's been, she attended Mass for a while until it just bored the bejesus out of her, and now she
still likes to come and take communion.
She'll come and take the communion. She does the Eucharist. It's the one time she's allowed to have wine, so I think she hates it, but she loves being able to do it. But she'll come out and do the actual communion. But she doesn't want to sit there while we do these endless prayers, she's too young to go to temple for Golden Dawn work with us. And whenever we do our actual rituals, now this doesn't count the offerings and stuff, she sees us do the candle offerings constantly. In fact, half the time I'm over here at Michael's altar and she's over there on the PlayStation with the earphones on. She could care less. And most of our elaborate rituals, if we're doing evocations, if we're doing Golden Dawn, watchtower ceremonies or whatever it is we're doing, we're usually locked in the temple. When she was younger, I would catch her peeking in the door.
Yeah.
She wanted to know what that was about. And we have taught her some things, like she knows the directions of the elements. She knows who the elementals are and that kind of stuff.
She got down the LBRP for a while. She wanted to learn that.
That's right. We taught her that. And she has participated in a couple of rituals out at Florida Pagan Gathering.
And she loves it. She doesn't want to sit and watch. She wants to participate.
So.
But it really has to be kind of based on her age and understanding and stuff.
So really that's been the extent of her magical experience, honestly. We figure as she gets older and wants to take, because she kind of lost that peeking in the door in the temple thing. Now she's like, oh, Dad's in there doing rituals again.
It's like a fish in water, I guess.
Dad's doing rituals. And basically, how exciting is it? She looks in the door and I'm just standing at the altar chanting psalms. I mean, it's like going to church, right? And she's at that tween age, so she's kind of not really interested. It's just what Mom and Dad do. But she's also just now becoming cognizant that we're famous. It might have been the last Glitch Bottle interview, or it might have been one we did after that, where we were sitting here listening to it after the fact on I think it was playing on YouTube. And she walked into the living room and it struck her. She said, "You're on the radio." I might be confusing that with another time when she heard you were interviewing somebody and the two of you started talking about me. And she was amazed that these people on the radio, she called it, were talking about me. So, and she doesn't know. I mean, Papa Chick and Aunt Tabby, she has no clue that those are famous people. So she's kind of discovering that little by little now. And as she takes more interest in this stuff, we'll teach her. And of course, there'll come that day when we'll take her in and actually put her through her first initiatory style rituals to introduce her to that side of things. And of course, we know someday she'll demand us to take her to temple for her neophyte.
She's already.
Yeah.
Actually, whenever we go to temple,
we're not sure if she's going to make it to 18 before she does that.
Yeah, because she is very interested. She asks us.
Yeah, because we go to temple and she always has to stay home, so she has no idea what goes on there.
And right now, as young as she is, it would be very boring.
Yeah, it would be like sitting through a mass, only a lot longer.
Yeah,
only a lot longer. But, it's not exciting for a kid.
She has seen little bits of it and stuff, and of course, we talk about what we do.
But as far as going out, as far as blurting things out that she hears, because we talk very freely about it, and we have told her, you don't talk about this stuff. That there have been points in history where they would actually come and take you away from us for hearing this stuff, and right now probably not, but you don't know about 5 years from now.
We do want to we do want to be a little careful because
on the one hand we're very out, and this is actually a decision I made when my son was born. In fact, it had a lot to do with why I started publishing books, because I said I'm still friends with my ex-wife. At the time, I didn't know it was going to be that way. I could see myself in court in a custody battle, and the opposing attorney revealing to the court that this man practices occultism in secret. And then, and I was like, no, that's never going to happen. If I get in trouble for being an occultist, that's fine, but no one will ever be able to reveal it as something I was hiding away.
Like some big dark secret.
Right. Everyone will know going in that this dude practices this stuff, and that's just where we're going to start. And so I've always been out about it. But again, being discreet. We didn't wear pinnacles out in public. I'm not always talking. And a lot of times if people ask me about it, I just give them an answer that will satisfy them, just shut them up and move on. So we're very private and discreet. But at the same time, if you ask us a direct question, I was out, I forget what I was doing outside. I was preparing something, and our roommate's friend pulled in and, hey, what you doing? It took me just one heartbeat, but I considered giving some kind of fake answer, just making something up, because we've done that, when we're gathering weird ingredients and people ask us questions. But I decided, what the hell? And I just said, oh, well, I'm a priest and I'm preparing holy water. And he went, oh, that's really cool. And he was perfectly happy with that answer, and he moved on, and a false answer would have actually raised more alarms with him and made him, oh, this guy's lying to me. What's he really doing? So we're both out, but we're also discreet about it. And I think you've had some stories about where AJ's blurted stuff out.
Yeah, it's always very interesting with AJ.
When she was little.
Yeah, well, no, even...
Okay.
Because, we're always a little different. And one of the things, too, is we homeschool AJ. So we don't have to worry about her going to school and telling stories. That's not necessarily why I'm doing it, but it's...
No, we don't want her in that system.
Yeah.
But that system is very antithetical toward any kind of occultism, so they would give us a lot of
yeah.
hassle.
So, to that point, AJ is homeschooled, so we don't have to worry about that part of things. But there have been times, especially when she was younger, like she would go to, take her to the park or whatever, and she'd be talking to the other kids, and somehow she'd start talking about angels or
our spirits,
it was like, yeah, honey, you can't really talk about that. And
the angels you can barely get away with. Don't talk about the spirits.
And I'll never forget, we were at a park near our house one day. I think AJ was maybe 5 or 6, and I think I've been doing work with my ancestors or something. But she started talking about them and somehow segued into Aaron's familiars that he deals with. And
she's been warned from the time she was a little girl, you don't go up to that altar.
Yeah.
You don't play with demons. You leave those familiars
alone. So, she's talking about ghosts, and then she starts talking about these demons that Daddy... And it's like,
demons.
I had to go over, I'm like, AJ, yeah, we need to... I saw the other mom's face, and I'm just like, oh, boy.
She said Daddy's semen. We're talking about having a little brother or sister for her. Daddy's semen.
She just overheard a conversation, So, there's been some interesting times, and then I...
Said that would be the lesser of two evils.
Right? She's very imaginative, and
she's a hell of an artist. You ought to see her art. It's incredible.
Years she wore cat ears.
She's doing sculpting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I know.
She's actually sculpting.
Her art's, she's going to be so far past me by the time she hits my age, it's ridiculous. But anyhow, this past few months, I kept having to go back and forth to New Jersey. I brought her with me the one time, and she was up there with me for about a month. And Halloween 2 years ago, she wanted to be, what's his name, Azrael from Undertale.
The goat thing?
Yeah.
The goat guy.
So I made her a costume, including paper-mache goat ears. So I put on a headband and
goat
made
horns,
the ears and
furry ears.
So it's a set of goat horns. Like the kids wear cat ears. She has the goat horns with the ears.
She wore cat ears for years.
Yeah.
And then you made her those goat horns.
And she hasn't taken them off since. I actually have to make her a new pair now. But anyhow.
You've seen pictures of her on Facebook with those goat horns, actually.
Yeah. She was a cat for years. She would tell people, I'm a cat. Well, now I'm a goat. And she would bleat.
And she changed her last name to Dreamer.
Yeah. She's A.J. Dreamer.
I've had to remind her about her lineage and the pride in her family and who the Leitches are and what we stand for to drag her back from that.
But, you know, she is a Capricorn, so she's taken that to a whole new level. But we would go in, and every day I would have to go visit a family member at a nursing home. And, oh my gosh, those people loved her. And
they loved her little goat horn.
They loved the goat horns. And whenever she would say hi, she would bleat like a goat. And they thought it was the most hysterical thing. There were only a couple people that I would run into that were just, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Just, they'd crinkle their nose and just be like,
standoffish, yeah.
Why would you let your kid do that? And I was in the elevator with this very elderly woman one day, and she was like, why isn't she in school? And I looked at her, and I'm like, well, number one, we're from Florida. We're not even from here. And number two, she's homeschooled. And this woman wanted to give me the third degree about AJ and the goat horns and blah. And I'm like, all I could do was just sit there like,
muggles,
open mouth. And I forget now what I finally said to her. It was we were getting off the elevator.
I know what I would have said to her.
Well, yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I forget now what smart-ass thing I said to her, but it was basically like, well, you know, I'm sorry, you don't have much of an imagination. And just went on about our day, and AJ was totally unfazed.
She
basically looked at me and was like, what the hell's wrong with her?
What's wrong with that lady?
You know?
I tell you what, we learn, and I was, I guess you could say, fortunate that I got to stay home at least. I mean, I had to run the business and stuff by myself, but we really learn, and especially Carrie really learned, to our shock, how truly removed from the muggle world we really are and have been for years.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we know we don't work really in the same world they do, and we have different friends and such, but we still figured we lived in the world like everybody else.
We live in a real world,
you know, we go to stores, we put gas in the car, but
pay bills, all that stuff.
But along comes this situation, you know, her mom was sick and such, and she had to go up there and deal with all of that stuff, which is stuff we don't do on any kind of usual basis. And it's just, it's really shocking how kind of disconnected from that whole world and its mindset
we are.
She actually had someone actually asked her while she was up there, she was talking about, I guess, me and being a writer and that we own this business and such, and their response was, well, why doesn't he get a better job?
Yeah, I had that a couple of times.
Yeah, and when she told me, that was where it really sunk into me. It's like, wow, that we are so far removed that they can't even fathom what we do, and we apparently aren't even aware of what they do and how they're thinking anymore.
When I was younger, I went to an office job. I, did the whole thing. And it really did shock me just how outside of that
we just decided,
muggle society we really are.
I think we just, decided when we were very young that we were not going to have anything to do with that world,
your consciousness is swimming in this esoterica for, years and years and years, and then you have, just like you say, you have an encounter in an elevator, or someone mentions something to you up north, and you're like, whoa, like they are approaching something from a completely different level of consciousness than the way we are.
To the point that you can't even really communicate with them. And this is a problem I have even in our community, really, where like a lot of my students in the Solomonic class, a good number of them are there because they would write me with these questions. And the problem with the questions are they weren't even the right questions, because there are other things they didn't understand first. So, and I have to tell them, like, look, the only way I can answer these questions is first I have to unteach you everything you think you know. Then I have to teach you all the right background material. Then I can answer these questions. And I tell them, like, honestly, I'm not going to do this in IM. I have a strict thing about that. I don't teach magic online outside of the structured class. So I tell them, I said, if you were to pay me for consults and actually call me and we talk by voice and you ask me these questions and I fully answer them for you, you would pay thousands of dollars, $50 at a time, to get everything you need. So why don't you just come over here and pay $200 and I will give you will have all of these classes, and once you've been through all of that basic material and you've got that background, then you can post your questions in the class group and I'll answer them. And so save both of us a lot of time, and it won't waste either of our time, and you'll get a hell of a lot more for what the hard-earned money you are putting up to try to learn this material.
Morgan was asking, even though you can't, she doesn't expect you to reveal spiritual protections, but if you could talk about some of the guides, entities, and angels that have helped shield your daughter.
I can be honest with you, we have not put any magical shielding or protection on her. But there's also a reason for that. So, we might have advice on how parents could do that. I'd probably have to think about it, maybe write something up. But Annie is another one of those special cases. See,
they kind of came to her.
A little bit of backstory here. Carrie, remember we told you that she was sick for a long time. She got to the point where she could barely even walk. Her joints were real messed up. We thought, and I don't even think it's true, but because of you being sick the way we didn't think that she could handle a pregnancy all the way to term. So we weren't looking toward that at all. We were just living our lives. And like I said, I think now that you're better, I don't even think that would have been an issue. But, so we weren't thinking about anything. With that in mind, one day in the Golden Dawn, because things have changed in the occult community, the way the order is actually set up officially is you don't do any magic in the outer order. You get the lesser banishing ritual and you get your grade material. There's meditations to do and invocations, but there's no magic, no practical magic. But today, most people who come into the Golden Dawn are there because they've already had magical experience of some type. So in today's order, we actually do have some things that officers have to be present, of course, but we have outer order magical rituals and evocations and stuff that we'll do. And for this one evocation, over a decade ago now, they decided to call down Yophiel, and Yophiel happens to be one of my primary patrons. The way we work is we actually have a medium. We call the angel down onto a medium. It's all done behind a veil, so once the entity is called down, everyone can go up behind the veil and actually have a one-on-one meeting with the entity. So I was the medium in this one, and Yophiel did come down. He kept pushing me out of my body so he could talk to them. And he had a personalized message for everyone who came up. And Carrie had just had gallbladder surgery. And she was still recovering from that.
It was only a few weeks after that.
Yeah. So I'm up there on the throne. It's not really me. I'm kind of standing off down this weird tunnel in my mind, kind of listening to all this. And she comes up, and they have their talk. I think you were taking a test or something you wanted to pass. She didn't.
Yep.
He had other plans for her. But she asked for blessings on her test and her work she was doing there, which involved your mom, oddly enough.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, fine, and he gave her a blessing. And then he pulled her in, and he reached out and he touched what I thought was her gallbladder scar and just charged her with energy. And he whispered in her ear,
there is still joy and laughter in the world.
There is still joy and laughter in the world, you're right. And so She went back to her throne.
And of course, it brought tears to my eyes.
She was crying, and I'm like, what the hell did any of that mean? I had thought that the message was just to make her feel better because she was going through a hard time, had the surgery and other issues. So she went back to her throne. Well, about, I'd say 10 or 11 months later.
That would have been the January meeting, and she was born in January. So it was almost...
So it was about a year later.
Yep.
I come home from work, and I was still working overnights, and Carrie is bent over holding onto a chair in the living room. I'm like, oh my God, are you okay? And she says, it's just that time. These are like the worst, cramps I've ever had. I'll be fine. All right, and I'm being the man. Well, hey, honey, I'd love to help you, but I'm going to go play Second Life because I don't know what else to do. So I went back to the bedroom and closed the door. I'm going to close the door, and I'm just going to you deal with it. It's your issue. Anything I say is just going to piss you off or make me look like an idiot. Like what I'm going to say, what do you want, a Tylenol, honey? No, just leave her alone. So I go back there, and I was back there for, a good 40 minutes when one of my ratties, Solomon, bless his soul, he decided to get my attention by shoving a bowl off of a shelf. I let my rats at the time run around free in the bedroom, and he shoved a bowl off of a dresser, and it shattered on the tile floor. And, I'm a hot-headed Celt. I'd usually yell and stuff, but I didn't. I was just like, what are you doing? Thanks. So I wasn't even mad at him. I don't think I was ever mad at Saul. And I cleaned up the glass, and I walked into the kitchen to throw it away, and there was Carrie still doubled over the chair. Had not moved even an inch. And I'm like, I don't think this is just time of the month stuff, hon. What's happening? She described the pain, and I was like, oh my God, you're having appendicitis. Do you want an ambulance? She's like, no, I'll make it to the car. Let's just go to the hospital. It took a while to get you to the car. Got her in the car.
Because I didn't want to go.
Even once you decided to go, because she was in a lot of pain. And took her to the hospital, the emergency room. They took her into triage and gave her an examination, said, yeah, she's pregnant. She's in labor. No, she's not. You guys are crazy. Oh, really? So they gave her a pregnancy test on the spot and showed it to us. And then they got on the phone, and I heard the words, they called the Women's Center. And they said, yeah, we need a bed right now. This is happening now.
Except it really wasn't.
Well, yeah. The labor was definitely happening, and she ended up, it was like, 12 hours?
Oh, God, no. It was like...
8?
No, it was over 20.
Over 20 hours.
I now, but it was over 20.
And, a lot of details there we won't go into, but it took a long time, and there was some issues with that, but it finally happened. And so here we are, 2 young people, never knew she was pregnant. She had several conditions that all came together at once. So there was literally no outer sign that we recognized that she was pregnant. Little Annie hid herself for 9 months. Actually, Carrie told me later that when Yophiel had reached out and juiced her, he had not touched her.
It wasn't my gallbladder scar.
Her gallbladder scar. He had reached lower, significantly lower, and juiced her. And
at the time, I almost jumped back because I'm like, we're in the middle of the temple. I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
But he touched her right on the wound, and blam. And I didn't realize that's what he had done. Like I said, I wasn't even really there. I was just kind of listening and kind of seeing it from a distance, and I thought he had touched her. I just assumed. So we realized what had happened and what Yophiel had done. And Yophiel, from the moment we realized what had happened, has been her godfather. She actually has a real-life fairy godfather, angelic godfather. So she is entirely under his protection, and I would really feel sorry for the poor bastard that tried to do anything to hurt that little girl.
Yeah, that is incredible.
We haven't had to do any rituals or talismans or spells. We protect the house and such, but her personally...
Well, she has that, and then when she was real little...
Oh, God, yeah.
I would catch several of my ancestors standing by her crib, but there was one in particular. She was from my paternal side, my father's mother, whom I was very close to. She was the one that, we really didn't have to speak much. But down a couple of generations, she's my great-great-grandmother. Her name was Candace, and I would see this figure standing by AJ's crib, a little taller than me, in a black dress that was, I would say probably 1860s, 1870s period. So very long, the very old-fashioned dress. And I knew it was one of my ancestors, but I didn't know who. And as I went along, I was doing some really intensive research into genealogy for a while. And I happened to run across a picture of my great-great-grandmother, and it was her. And so her name's Candace.
Yeah. Actually, I think everyone in the house saw her because I've seen her sitting we had a rocking chair next to the crib, and I've seen her sitting in that rocking chair. I think I was the second person to be called.
Yeah.
I have actually heard her because one night the baby was crying, so I went in and picked her up, and I sat in the rocking chair and was rocking her, and somebody called my name. Somebody called Aaron. It was a female voice, so I think it was her. And I actually got up and came out and asked Carrie what she wanted. I mean, it was that audible. It wasn't just like I thought I heard it. It was very clear, Aaron. And I'm like, what do you want? And
that would happen to us.
Yeah. So she was definitely being watched very closely by this ancestor.
And then, of course, she found Cthulhu and put him on a leash.
Yeah, then there's the whole Cthulhu story. Oh, my God.
So, yeah, I
think we told you that story on a previous episode where she had the little doll Cthulhu she started carrying around. She was terrified of going into any dark place. Imaginative kids are often very terrified of the dark. I know I was when I was a kid.
I was too.
And she's had mortal terror of the dark. And there's certain areas of the house she wouldn't go in. And one day she was standing in front of the laundry room. It was dark. She had to go through the laundry room to get to another room. And she didn't want to go in. And she was holding her Cthulhu doll. And I said, why don't you want to go in? She goes, I'm scared of the dark. And I said, but you're holding Cthulhu. And she says, yeah. And I said, honey, the dark is afraid of Cthulhu. And this little look came over her face, and she said, oh. And she marched right on in there. And from that point forward, anytime she would get afraid of the dark or of monsters or something, she would actually call Cthulhu. We tried to teach her from a young age, sweetie, those things in the dark, those are actually your friends. Normal children can be afraid of them, but your job is to actually control them. But you can't even tell that to a real little kid, and they don't get that. They just know that there's these scary things they don't understand. And Cthulhu's fine. I mean, that's basically just Leviathan. Through the Abra-Melin system, I work with Leviathan, so she can call on him for protection. That's fine. So that's
not a normal conversation that people usually
have.
Yeah,
your daughter can call on Leviathan. So again, I truly and honestly feel sorry for the poor MFer who tries to do anything magically or mundane that would harm that little girl, because there's some really big and in some cases very nasty entities that would not be very pleased with said person. So,
question from Franklin Cornelius Melmoth was saying, my question is how both of your magical practices influenced the raising of your daughter, and when she first began to show interest in helping with Doc Solomon's, has she ever expressed any interest in terms of going deeper down the Solomonic road?
Yeah, right now she's in that tween state where I said she's not interested. She's interested in Undertales and Minecraft and stuff like that. Yeah. And we're letting her do it,
And she kind of does have her own little take on little things that she'll do.
Yeah, but of course, like I said, she's an incredible artist and loves doing art. So I can definitely see her doing art for Doc Sols at some point.
But I also see her, because she has already developed a very unique style. And in drawing, painting, and in sculpting, it's like one cohesive style. It's amazing. I never did that. I can see her doing her own thing, but I
will say this, going back to the question of how has our magic affected how we raise her, she has been raised with the literal and objective existence of spirits and angels and gods as being a simple fact of reality. She has never been told, stop imagining, never been told, hey, come back to the real world. She's never been told, she's always been encouraged in her imagination. In fact, her cat transformation got to the point we actually did have to pull her back. I mean, we are trying to show her reality too. Well, I mean, it's all reality to us, but we're showing her how it's all reality. you don't just get into the fantasy of angels and stuff and forget the actual, Malkuth, the actual real world. And you don't just go full force into the real world and pretend that all these spirits don't exist. So the faculties and the mindset and the worldview that is really necessary to make this magic work, and that Carrie and I had to struggle. We had to unlearn the worldview we were raised with and find a way to accept this. And, a lot of Westerners, they just can't accept the idea that spirits really exist. They really want it to just all be in your mind, so.
And even if they do, a lot of times they're looking at it a very dualistic.
And even if they do, it's very dualistic,
This is only good and
demon
this is bad.
And it doesn't work that way either. So she's going to have the advantage if she chooses to go this way. And, God knows she could rebel and become a fundamentalist Christian, just to piss us off. We don't know. She's definitely been raised with a worldview that makes all of this possible. Like Carrie says, her advancement in art. I mean, that's always been, something we've encouraged, even the simplest little drawings when she was 3. Oh, that's amazing. Wow, you did this at 3? Wow. And it's gotten to the point where when she shows us things she draws, it really does kind of floor us that a 10-year-old is doing this.
And to that point, too, I noticed that she is like us in that she kind of learns on her own. She goes and finds resources.
Oh, God, YouTube is, amazing for her.
Oh, yeah. I wish I'd had that resource because, I'm a self-taught artist, and it took me years to go through and learn and perfect all the stuff that I do because I use a lot of medieval techniques. A lot of what I do isn't based in modern working. A lot of times I'll make my own gesso, I'll make my own paints. The ground for my gold leaf work, I make that myself, all using medieval techniques. And that kind of stuff was really, really hard to find, 25, 30 years ago. But now you go to YouTube and it's there, but that's, she's been able to advance in ways I don't think I could have at that age because she has more resources, but she's also on her own going and finding these resources and watching them and learning and doing all these things very independently. So it's kind of amazing to see because that's how, we've done a lot of our own work is just self-taught, going and finding the resources and working through it.
That's like her spinning, and maybe this is part of what taught her to do this, but, I wanted her to spin thread. Which, by the way, we kind of had to drag her to do that, kicking and screaming at first. There were times when she just did not want to spin thread, and even now she doesn't. But now she's to the point where she can do it all herself. It used to be I had to sit there and draft the wool to the spindle while she would spin it. Now she just, Dad, get out of my way, and she just does it herself. But I just went to YouTube, and I didn't know anything about spinning thread, and so I went to YouTube and found tutorials and built a spindle and
there we go.
Taught myself and then taught her. So she's always kind of seen us.
Yeah.
And Carrie does that all the time too. If there's something she needs to know how to do, you just go to YouTube or Google and find some instructional something that'll tell you how to do it, and off you go. So she's really picked that up.
Yeah, she's very, very independent. So.
Oh yeah, you can't tell her anything.
Yeah.
No, you can't tell her how to do anything.
She has to be able to do it on her own.
I've tried to give her tips on drawing and stuff, and she's picked up a couple of things.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if I show her something that she's like, oh wow, I didn't know, she'll be fine. But half the time you'll show her something, she's like, yeah, I already know that. Yeah. I already watched 4 videos on that, Dad. I already know that.
It's going to be interesting to see, how she develops over time and what she does end up doing, because as much as she's in our world and, she's doing the art and that's what she wants to be, that's not changed. And I can't remember when she wants to be an artist.
Wants to be an artist. Yep.
There's not been, I want to be a fireman. I want to do this. I want to do that.
She didn't go through, I want to be a princess phase. None of that.
She wouldn't have anything to do with the Disney princesses.
She wants to do art. Yeah. Even in Minecraft, she goes into Minecraft to make sculptures.
And she builds things in there.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see with that independent mindset where she does end up going.
Yeah, and don't forget, we have a very strict rule in our order that if you are pregnant, you don't go into our vault in the inner order. So, because you don't want those energies affecting the baby.
Really through initiations, through anything.
Yeah, that's why you have to be 18. We don't want to, you don't want to dump that loose on somebody when they're still developing. it needs to be a choice that they can make.
Right.
But remember what I said, that Yophiel hid this pregnancy from us for 9 months. So this little girl has actually been involved in probably all the outer grade ceremonies, all the outer grade initiations from neophyte on up. This little girl has been in the vault, involved in adept work.
I was sitting Hierophant.
She was sitting Hierophant for 6 months out of her pregnancy. Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So this was her channeling the Lukes into her body and out into the temple to initiate other people while she was pregnant.
And that's something that, you know, I would...
This kid is the Kwisatz Haderach, is what she is.
You know, had things gone under, you know, quote-unquote normal circumstances, I wouldn't have done any magic through that period.
At least not as far as, invoking powerful energies.
I might have, you know, gone through, you know, like reading Psalms or, you know, something like that.
Consecrations and stuff, but not big stuff.
But the heavy-duty magic, no. I never would have done that. But, you know, in this instance, I kind of just have to trust that they know what they're doing.
It's amazing. She's an amazing girl. It's going to be an interesting next few years. So she is proud of her thread, and she's very Capricorn. She's always wanting me to have sales and wanting me to advertise her thread and stuff like that. So she does take pride in the work that she does. Like I said, we kind of had to drag her kicking and screaming at first, and I would play songs and stuff to make it fun for her. But now she's a little more.
But again, it's now she can do it on her own.
Yeah, she can do it on her own.
That's a big thing, I think.
And she has more money than any other 10-year-old she knows because, you know, she gets 20% of everything. We're keeping some of it back for, you know, her education and such, but she also deserves, you know, what she earns. So she's bought herself a tablet, and you know, she has her little purse, and when we go out shopping, if she remembers the purse, she'll have some money on her.
She's bought stuff online, and you know, it's cute.
So cute.
That is so cool.
And we'll get her doing more as her skills grow, especially her artistic skills. We'll start having her do some of the sigil work and stuff.
Yeah, but she's going to have to sit down and actually have the patience to learn a little bit of calligraphy.
That's going to be a few years. That's going to be a few years.
Carrie, this is a 3-part question from Annalise Antoinette, who says, Carrie, when it comes to female practitioners, in your experience, what do you find, A, in general, that we are doing right, that we should keep doing? What are we doing wrong that we should stop? And what are female practitioners currently not doing or not asking themselves if they would significantly positively impact their practice? So can you give us kind of a survey of the topography of advice for female practitioners?
Wow. That's a big set of questions.
So what are the ladies doing right?
Just do the work and don't worry about and I don't care if either gender, don't worry about what other people think, what other people say. Just sit down and do the work. Over the last year, I guess, or so, there's been a lot of debate and talk about women's roles in magic and that kind of thing. And to be honest, I think I've had, and I don't know for what reason, maybe just luck that I'm surrounded by such wonderful people, but I have not had a lot of the experiences that other women in magic seem to have had. I've always been very supported and, you know, very encouraged to do magic, and
that chick has pushed you to give lectures and
stuff. Yeah, because just on my own, I wouldn't be writing, I wouldn't be giving classes and stuff without, you know, people coming to me and saying, hey, you know, we want you to do this. Because I tend to be very introverted and very reserved to begin with. So I've always been very encouraged to, you know, speak, to write, to teach, to do all of these things. It's, I think, a little different than some folks some of their experience. So what are we doing right? Number one, just doing the work and encouraging others to do the work. Forging new pathways, talking to spirits. That's all I can say really is just, you know, just do it. And don't worry about what everybody, you know, as long as you're following the rules and the guidelines and stuff that are kind of set out in the grimoires, don't worry about what some idiot on the other side of the screen may or may not be saying. Because in the end, it really boils down to your relationship with your magic, your spirits, And those that
you were hardly on the internet for
you work
years.
with. Yeah.
No one knew what you were doing. You didn't care what anyone's opinion was.
Exactly.
You didn't even ask them what their opinion was.
No. And I've always kind of been like that, too. And I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how just shocked I was at the muggle world. Because I've always kind of kept my head down and done my own thing. And not worried about what others may or may not think of what I'm doing. So, just that independent streak. You do what you do. If it's producing good results, if you're moving forward, that's awesome. And I'm really happy to see and encouraged by a lot of the other female practitioners I'm seeing. Tabitha Cicero has been an incredible influence in my life. And, Chick obviously too, and how they work together. And, she's always very independent. She always does her own thing, but then they work together. And it's just...
You're the same way.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think I've just had very, very good influences. And I see a lot of other women out there that are the same way. Don't get caught up in the politics. Don't get caught up in the other stuff. You are known by your works. That's it. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the core of it. I have such a different perspective than I think I see a lot of other folks. So
I remember Chick singled you out years ago and said, I like you, you're quiet, and you do the work. And yeah, look at you now, so. Yeah,
and I think that is something, I don't know if it's just among women, but I do tend to be very quiet. I do tend to keep to myself. And it's been very difficult for me to put my work out there just because, I don't know, I'm an introvert and I have a Scorpio moon, so I don't really like, even he doesn't know what I'm up to half the time.
Yeah, it makes me think of Taoism. If you don't put your stuff out there, no one can tear it down.
Right.
She just doesn't play the game. I was out there playing the game and getting in fights and arguments and stuff, but you were just doing your own thing. That's all you did.
That's my best advice, and if you're doing that, that's great. As for what women are doing wrong, I don't know. I think at least in my opinion, we can go about this in all different kinds of ways. I don't find it necessary most of the time to be very confrontational. I'm double water. I don't like confrontation. And I avoid it whenever necessary, but I do have a streak where, sometimes it is necessary to stand up and say, hey, you're being stupid, or hey, this is wrong. Whenever you do see things like that, take care of it and move on. Don't ruminate over it. And don't paint everyone by the same brush. Just because you have an experience with one person or with 5 people or a group of people, not everyone's the same way. We can't just let that keep us removed from what we need to do. If this is something that you're called to, then do it. Muggle world, magic world, it doesn't matter. You're going to run into people that suck. That's just the way of the world. And we can either let ourselves be consumed by that, or we can take it and try to change it, not only within the world, but inside too, kind of a spiritual alchemy kind of thing. We can either let that make us better, or we can sit there and ruminate on it and, make it something that's horrible and terrible. Don't ruminate on things. If it's what you're meant to do, do it. It sucks that people suck sometimes and that people run into some really bad people, but don't let that stop you from what you want to do. And don't let that ruminate and become something bigger than it is. In the end, people's opinions, especially on those kinds of things, don't matter. I have had
most of the time they're wrong anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I have had literally less than a handful of experiences where someone has shown some kind of gendered bias. I was like, oh, well, don't you suck. And the 2 people that I can think of off the top of my head that's happened with, I've never heard from again. never seen or heard from them, moved on, and that was it. So you are going to run into those people, but focus on the ones that are good. Be able to see what is good. Don't paint everyone with the same brush, because not everybody sucks.
I think both women and men will find that really valuable.
Universal, actually.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Carrie. And Aaron, this is a similar vein, but I think it goes to what Carrie was saying, is another question from Annalise saying, Aaron, and especially now that you've been, both you and Carrie have been, at this for so many years, the question is, Aaron, what are the biggest obstacles for beginners to ceremonial and grimoiric magic, in addition to reading your books and taking your beginner courses, which we'll make sure to get into? What are the best ways for people just starting out to overcome those obstacles?
The class material was kind of written to address that, so I can't really speak besides the classes, what do you need to do, because we mentioned this earlier, people ask me questions and I can't answer them because first I have to unteach you. How many people do you meet, for example, in the modern occult world who know what the word invocation means? This is a perfectly common, ubiquitous example. So we
were actually discussing this with AJ a couple of days ago.
About why you can't just make up meanings for words. If you're talking about invocation to a room full of people, let's say I'm giving a lecture or something, a good percentage of the people in that room are going to think that invocation means to call a spirit inside your body, that it's a synonym for ritual possession. And I've not been able to find or fathom where that came from, but that's not what that word means. Invocation just means to pray earnestly. So anytime you pray to an entity, you're performing an invocation. So if you're performing an evocation, an exorcism, a ritual possession, consecrating a talisman, making a candle offering, or just saying your bedtime prayers, all of those require and involve invocation. So if I'm talking to somebody who thinks that invocation means ritual possession, most of what I'm saying about invocation will go right over their heads and make no sense.
The difference between invocation and evocation is also a common thing that's discussed.
Well, that's actually what I just addressed half of that, because they think invocation is the antonym of evocation, and it's not. You can't perform an evocation without performing an invocation as part of it. It has nothing to do with calling the entity inside your body. It just means to pray earnestly. So this is just a perfect example of what, if I'm going to have a conversation with somebody about this kind of magic, I have to make sure they understand what the words actually mean. Or if you're going to read the Key of Solomon, here, perform this invocation, and then it's just a prayer, and you're going, well, where's the part where I call the angel into, down into my body? Well, there is no such part, because that's not what invocation means. So that's why I say I made the classes so that I could direct people there to avoid the pitfalls. Same thing with both the classes and my book, too. The biggest problem people face, and Annalise is one of my students, so I know she has faced this personally, is just the ridiculous amount of information that's out there. And you've got tons of books written by people who themselves don't understand what words mean. That's why you have so many modern occult books that use the word invocation to mean ritual possession. So you learn the wrong use of the word. You've read 12 books that all use the word wrong, and then you come to me and I'm telling you you're using the word wrong. I had another example. A young man contacted me. I assume he's a young man. Actually, I don't know his age. A gentleman contacted me the other day and said, "Do you ever work with goetics?" I'm like, goetics? What's that? I said, that sounds like an exercise program. What is that? And he goes, the spirits that are in the 72 from the Goetia. I'm like, oh, yeah. I said, I figured that's what you meant. And I explained, I said, Goetia is not a type of spirit. Goetia is a type of magic. The spirits are chthonic spirits. They're underworld spirits. But Goetia is the kind of magic you use to call them. It would be like saying, well, I'm going to summon a couple of witchcraft spirits. Or I'm going to summon a Kabbalah spirit. You're not really saying anything, So I explained that to him, and then he responded back to me with a rather long explanation of how language works and how words change over time. and that nowadays the word goetics has come to popularly mean spirits from the Goetia. So I read his very well-educated and eloquent response, and noted that he had made his point, and I responded only with the words, yes, but they're wrong. And I ended up directing him to my classes too. So it's all the stuff that you think you've already learned. Other examples are people, you see this on the Solomonic group, they come in and you can tell right from the get-go they're speaking from a 100% dualist, kind of popular, almost fantasy viewpoint of the angels and the demons. Well, I invoked Beelzebub and a portal to hell was opened and all these horrible things came out, and everyone else on the group is like, this isn't the Beelzebub we know. What are you talking about? And just because they're coming from this very popular, like, have you ever seen the movie Constantine? They've seen that stuff, and that's what they think we do. We're working with the angels to keep the evil spirits under the control of Lucifer at bay, and they want to come in and be part of that. And we're like, no, actually, we work with the spirits and make offerings to them, and we call down the angels and ask them to work with us. And they're not actually at war at all. They're working together, and everyone's happy with it, and it blows their mind. They're not even speaking the same language. And that's why you see me have to moderate the Solomonic group sometimes, say, no, you need to go read the group description, you need to read the rules, and you need to be quiet for a while so you see what we're actually doing here, because it is not what you think it is. And so this is why I direct people so often to my classes, not because I'm trying to get rich off the classes, that's never going to happen, but because you've taken these classes, so you need the history, you need the mythology and the lore, you need to understand, the worldview, which I teach in the astrology portion of the classes. You cannot even approach these spirits and this system until you have all of that. But once you have that, this goes back to having the language in your head. Now you've got the basis, and when you start going out to other sources, now the grimoires are going to make sense to you. Agrippa is going to make sense to you. This book over here, published by Llewellyn in 1994, probably is not going to help you much. And you know what I'm saying? So you'll be better able to judge. And this big mass of information, every one of them screaming at you that they're right and everyone else is wrong, you will have ground to stand on to judge those and figure out what you need. And plus, if you're in the classes, you've got the group, so you have direct line to me, and you can always ask me and the other alumni of the classes questions. There's the Solomonic group. People have those resources, and they're still asking, what do I do? But we started when those resources didn't exist. And I'm still amazed at these resources. And when people ask me that question, I'm like, what do you mean? You've got the Solomonic group. You've got Secrets of the Grimoires. You've got these classes. You've got email and IM that you can talk to me in. And you have more available to you now to make sense of this and make it work than we had probably for 400 or 500 years. So that's your best way through, is get a good foundation. And if you know what you're talking about and you know what the words actually mean, and you can actually read the old text and you can see, they say he who hath eyes see and hath ears hear. You can actually see what these guys are saying and the problems they were dealing with and addressing. Whereas maybe 20 years ago, when you first picked up that Mather's Key of Solomon in the bookstore, and it just looked like gibberish. So if you can get over that and it's no longer gibberish and you know what they're really saying, and you realize, this goes back to what we were talking about before. These people think that, I need to pick one book and follow it. Well, no, you don't. This is a one collective tradition, and you can see the common threads running through all the grimoires. Being a grimoire purist means drawing from different grimoires. It doesn't mean just following one book. The old Solomonic magicians that just followed one book, that was back in the day when you would have to quest for decades to be lucky enough to maybe get a glimpse at a Key of Solomon. Maybe a real Key of Solomon, and maybe one someone just made up. So when, these old masters got a hold of a Heptameron or a Liber Geratus or a Key of Solomon, they would feverishly scribble down everything they could before they would again have to give the book back to whoever, they got it from. And then they would just have to follow what they had. So they would have their book, their notes they took, and that was it. But that's not really the way the tradition worked. Does that make sense? you may only have one book, but that book came to you from a larger collective tradition of a lot of interweaving and intersharing. But on the other hand, because we also talked about this earlier, if you're going to go around and say, I did the Abra-Melin operation, don't let me find out 5 minutes into the conversation that you drew from the Abra-Melin operation, but you used the magic circle from the Key of Solomon, and you used the Heptameron's prayers, and you know what I'm saying? If you're going to say you did an operation in a book, then by all means do that operation in the book without drawing in irrelevant things. And, well, I like this sword better, so I think I'll just do that instead. So there is that kind of fidelity that you need to follow. But at the same time, you'll find just as many grimoires that don't give specific instructions. And they'll say, just consecrate this. Well, how do I learn to consecrate this? Well, look at the Key of Solomon. And some grimoires are written that way. People have a misconception of what grimoire purism, and I know this is way off the original question, but people have a misconception of what grimoire purism means.
Well, it's where do beginners start? Well,
right.
First off,
and again,
there's
you're
the
right.
misconception.
So you're right. That was the original question. So I am still on topic. It's like a balance. On the one hand, you can't just make it up as you go along. Well, I like this sword and I like this invocation, but I don't like this part of this invocation, so I'm going to replace that with this part of this invocation, and then think you're doing right. And then go around telling everyone, well, I did the Key of Solomon's work when you really didn't. But on the other hand, don't come at the system thinking that if I don't do everything exactly the way this grimoire says, then I'm doing it wrong, because that's also not the way it works either.
And that actually brings up a point, too, to me, that in a larger context, people want to make everything very black and white. Mm-hmm. This is this, that is that, and
this is the invocation you say here, and you memorize it word for word, and if you don't do that, and you change the wording somehow, then that's not right. You're now no longer a grimoire purist. But that's not how the books are written if you look at them.
There's the way the angels are good, demons are bad.
All that dualist stuff,
And it seems to tend to bleed over into the grimoires and stuff, where it either has to be this or it has to be that. No, sometimes there is a gray area where things do mix. Mm-hmm. You really kind of have to expand your thinking.
A great example is the 4th book of Occult philosophy. If you look at, say, the Key of Solomon, it says, here's the invocation for this, here's how you do this, here's the formula, and it gives you everything you need. But then look at the 4th book. It gives you all these ritual instructions, but without giving you the specifics. It just says, hey, you need to consecrate holy water, for example. You need to consecrate your holy water. How do you do that? Well, look in the Bible, and there's places where God blessing or creating or whatever has to do with water, bringing water out of the dry ground or out of the stones, whatever. Use those passages and write a prayer and ask God to consecrate it. And that's all it tells you to do. So it is a very free-form thing, and it's like when I'm standing at my altars and I use the Heptameron, first I'll consecrate, like when I'm doing the candle offerings, first I'll consecrate the fire and the coal. And when you consecrate the fire, I use the Key of Solomon's exorcism of the fire. And the exorcism of the fire and the key, you say, in the name of the creator of the universe, you ask for the consecration. I exorcise the, O creature of fire. You're getting the bad spirits out. It ends with, and that the spirits will appear before us without fraud or deceit in any way. Now, when I use this exorcism of the fire at these candle offerings, I'm not asking for any spirit to appear, A. And B, why would I be asking for an archangel to deal with me without fraud or deceit in any way? That phrase was not meant for working with archangels. It was meant for working with chthonic spirits. When I do that invocation, like let's say, for example, I'm working with Sakiel and Yophiel up here at my Jupiter altar, I will exorcise the fire. And I will use the god name of Jupiter, El, and at the end I will say, so that the spirits of Jupiter will move with benevolence and loving kindness and righteousness for our family and for our clients. And, and it's actually made so that you can change parts of the invocations to match what you're doing. This leads into the next part of it, your spirit's participation. Your spirits, as you do this kind of work, are, you may be following a ritual in a grimoire to the absolute letter. And you may get to a point and the spirit will say, hey, do this too. I want you to do this.
Right.
Change this. Say this instead of that. add this. Oh, hey, you know what? When you do this invocation, there's this talisman and this other grimoire over here. I want that on the altar when you do that. So they, not you, and this is important. You don't go into this and say, oh, well, I like this and I like that and I think this is cool and I'm just going to put together my own system. No. It's your spirits who will tell you, I like this, I want that, change this. And by the time you're done, what you're doing will not resemble much what the grimoire says to do. It'll still obviously be the same system, the same formulas, the same magic. But your spirits will have given you your personalized instructions on what to do, not to do, change, add, remove, and all of that.
And that takes time.
And
that's something that I don't...
Years.
Yeah. Especially whenever folks are new to magic, people get very excited. And in today's society, a lot of people are all about instant gratification. A lot of new folks, well, I did this spell and a week later nothing's happened.
Oh, our clients do that all the time. You did this candle offering for me and nothing has happened. Well, it's been a week, guy.
Yeah.
You got to wait 6 months.
And whenever you're working with, the archangels and things like that, they're working on a much broader level than we are down here.
Yeah, they'll make changes that you won't even realize they've made for years.
Yeah. And sometimes, maybe the result will be immediate, but there's more to it. But wait, there's more.
Yeah.
And they work in all kinds of different ways.
And they work very slowly because these guys are not on the timeline like we are.
Right.
To them, they can look down at the whole, from the beginning to the end, and we know it's a circle, but this is just for illustration. From the beginning of time to the end, they can see at one glance. So when we're down here saying, this is an emergency, you got to do this now, they're like, oh, seriously, this is not an emergency. I mean, they're looking at world wars, they're looking at famines, they're looking at...
And I think that...
they're looking at real problems that humanity as a whole are facing throughout time and space, and we're down here going, I really need a new car by next Tuesday.
But that's another reason why...
To them, it's just not important to them, so they take their time.
Like for us, we work with different classes of spirits. We work with the archangels, we work with all kinds, all the way down to and including, chthonic spirits. Each one reacts in a different way. Each one has its own result, way of working, yet they all form this cohesive result. And again, a lot of times you won't see the actual results of your workings for quite some time.
Yeah, like I said, we always tell our clients you got to give it at least 6 months to know if anything is going to come.
Especially if it's something major, something big. You've got to have patience and you've got to take the time to work through the grimoires, to learn what's going on there. You got to know the rules before you can break them, and you have to learn all of these things so that this part of this conjuration has this formula, so if I need this, I can put this here. Like you were just talking about with the conjurations of the angels, or the exorcisms, or whatever. So you have to know when and how to do those things. And you have to know when to listen to your spirits, when to stay with the book. And, sometimes it's happened on a very rare occasion where something will slip in and it's like, something's telling me that something's not quite right. And so you go and you look a little bit further and you're like, oh, well, that's
something they don't like or something they want or,
so.
Or a lot of times with me, I'll be studying something, like we'll be on the Solomonic group and we're talking about all these new talismans we've recently discovered. And it hasn't actually happened with those, the Kandare, but it has happened with other things where I'll be looking at it or studying it or something, and then one of them will speak and go, I want that on my altar. Mm-hmm. The next time you do this ritual, I want this here in this way, and and they'll tell me how they want it. But it all comes kind of in a flash while you're studying this thing. And it happens when we're out too. We'll be in the store and they'll see something they like, I want it, gotta have it. They'll let you know, but it's kind of it's an inspiration. It's a push.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I'm big on watching for signs and omens and stuff. Is I've had them come to me that way. Patience, nothing is black and white, and it's going to take time to learn the spirits that you're working with, learn their personalities.
Yeah, remember, this is everything we teach. Secrets of the Grimoires, the classes, all of that stuff. it goes back to the reason why they call them the keys of Solomon. They're keys. It's not the whole system. What we teach is just to get you to, first of all, train you on the basics of the system, obviously, to do your consecrations, to learn your astrology, to learn the lore. Once you've done that, and we have taught you how to set up an altar and make your first contacts with your spirits, then it's really up to them. And I'm not saying there's no further classes. I've got more classes coming, more advanced classes. But as far as, what book do I follow? What system, how do I put all this in? That's where you do have to ask your spirits. They'll tell you what they want. You know the basic rituals, and then you just start working with them. The spirit at your altar, when you first set up your altar, the spirit itself is also very young. I mean, even if it's an archangel, you've called down a spark of the archangel. It's not the whole archangel, and it's a baby. It's an infant, and you're training it, and it is also training you. And the two of you will grow together. And it's going to be hard to hear the spirit at first or understand the spirit, what it wants. But little by little, as your relationship grows and the more attention you pay to that relationship, the more the communication will grow. I mean, this is something humans do naturally. Ask any guy who owns a boat or a sports car. Okay? This thing that you love and work with every day and pour so much energy into, you start to anthropomorphize it. It starts, you name it, you refer to it as he or she, you start noticing that it has a personality and it has quirks. And if a muggle can do that with a boat or a sports car, then there's no reason to even question whether or not an occultist can do that with the spirit on their altar. And just like that, it will grow. And you will discover its personality, and you'll ask for things and they won't come through, and you'll ask for some things and they'll come through real fast, and you'll learn what the spirit wants to do and what it doesn't want to do. And depending on the type of, archangel versus chthonic spirit, how much control you can have over what it refuses to do and not do. But, again, this is just something that grows over time. But once you've learned those basics and started that relationship, books will always be a part of it. I mean, I'm still learning. I just learned within the last year or two, learned about the Kandari and why those two opposing instructions for talismans has existed in the Key of Solomon for centuries. No one knew. But then now I just learned about these new talismans. So even I'm still learning.
Oh, yeah.
But past that, even though you're always going to be studying and learning from mundane sources, mundane meaning books and stuff, your main teachers are going to be your patron. Your head spirit, your familiars, the entities that you work with on a regular basis. They're the way through the field ahead of you. They will dictate what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done. So that's really the best advice we've got is do the work, learn the basics, and build those relationships. I know I've said this a trillion times I think I've ended almost every show with that same advice. Build those relationships. It's not in your head. And it's not about you.
It's kind of the same within Muggle society. People talk about networking and building relationships and da-da-da. It's the same. You're just dealing with things that other people can't see.
Non-corporeal entities.
Right. You want to be...
And you can't just make it up as you go along because it's not about you. I don't care, and this really... You saw me post about this, Alex. This really irks me when I see people say, well, I don't like the arrangement of elements that they use in these other systems. I don't just do traditions just because someone tells me that that's the way it should be. So since I live in a place where there's a lake over here to the east, I'm going to make water in the east. Yeah. And I've got a forest over here in the west, so I'm going to put earth in the west. It's not about you. It's not about your local environment. It's not about what you think is cool. It's not about what you find most comfortable. I get this all the time. I don't want to recite these psalms. They're too Christian. I don't believe in that. Well, then why are you using the grimoires, first of all? And second of all, if you take the time to learn the history of the psalms, you find out those are all ancient pagan prayers. They just came in and they scribbled out Baal or El, and they wrote Yahweh. And I'm not joking. I know that sounds funny, but they literally have found ancient texts where the name of the Canaanite deity has been scratched out and Yahweh has been written on top of it. These prayers don't mean what the church has taught you they mean all along. Psalm 51, in iniquity did my mother conceive me. And people hate that line, and I understand that.
And in sin did my mother,
Yeah, because in sin did my mother conceive me. That is the line in the Bible that fundamentalists jump on to say, see, God says sex is a sin. Until you actually do a little study and learned that the psalm in its original language is actually saying, I was a sinner from the moment my mother conceived me.
Right.
In sin did my mother conceive me. It's just worded in an obscure way so you can interpret it in the crappy way. But that's not what David was saying. He wasn't bashing his mother and said she did something horrible by having sex to make him. He was being self-deprecating, saying, I am such a horrible sinner. I've been a sinner since even before I was born. Even before I was born.
The second I was conceived,
I suck.
I've been a sinner.
And once, and I've had a lot of students come to me with that problem, and they want to change. Well, can I use these Buddhist prayers? No, sir, you can't. First of all, take the time to learn what the psalm actually means, and you'll find out it doesn't mean what you thought it meant. And second of all, now that you know what it actually means, use it, because that's what the system requires. You don't have to bring in these disparate things because of your own hang-ups. There's nothing wrong with Christianity. There's nothing wrong with Judaism. There's nothing, it doesn't matter how much damage the church has done. If another religion had taken over the world, they would have done it too. The Egyptians weren't exactly nice to people either, but no one has a problem with Horus or Isis. They ruled the world for 3,000 years in a really brutal way, by the way. You talk about religious intolerance. They'd come to your house and kill you if they found you practicing another religion. So the Christians weren't unique. It doesn't excuse them, but it does excuse the religion. Jesus, or the Christos, if you want to go Gnostic and take Jesus out of the equation, which Gnosticism basically does, as far as the Christos is concerned. But none of that has anything to do with all the politics and crap that's been done in the name of that religion. So if you're going to come into this system, don't get hung up on the biblical terminology, the Psalms, the prayers that say, forgive me for I'm a sinner. I tell my students, well, what, are you perfect? Sin is that which moves you away from God. Have you never done anything that you thought moved you away from God? Are you not trying through all this work you're doing to move yourself closer to God? You can admit to your faults. There's no reason. It doesn't mean that you think you're a horrible person because you have sex, or that you're a horrible person because you have natural human desires and needs. That's all BS. That doesn't have to have anything to do with your practice.
You just reminded me, when John King was on the podcast talking about imperial arts and kind of his experiences, and he kind of brought up exactly that, which is people say, I'm a Buddhist, I don't want to use these terms, but it's like these terms are the mutually agreed upon terms that you are executing as an operator or as someone engaging with the spirits that have these kind of trace signatures on them that resonate with the spirits, and it's mutually agreed upon terms. So you may not even believe in some of these terms, but that doesn't mean that you should change them. You should still fulfill the mutually agreed upon terms of the ritual itself.
Yeah, and I've actually taught that very thing in my class on invocations I used to give, that I've given out at Florida Pagan Gathering. I tell them, it's like, look, there are things you can change. There's no one part of any ritual in any system that you couldn't zero in on and make a great argument for why that one thing isn't necessary. I could change this one thing and the system would work. Yeah, you're probably right. And you could probably take out the prayers and put in Buddhist prayers, and there's nothing saying that because you did that, the spirits won't hear you and respond. But here's the point that I do make. These rituals have been being done for a very long time. And remember when I said that the spirits and the angels, they're not on the timeline, they're above it. They can see all of history, past and future, in one glance, the same way you can look at a page and see the whole page at once. So when you perform a ritual and you keep it in line with the way that ritual has been performed for hundreds or thousands of years, you are literally harmonizing yourself with every one of them, past, present, and future. The spirits can hear all of you saying that invocation together. You can change this and you can change that, just like in a choir. You can change your pitch. You can maybe throw in a little bit of a flourish here and there and not hurt anything. Maybe even make the chorus sound better. But the more you change, every change you make is just a little bit more disharmony between you and everyone else doing the same thing. And eventually you can make up your own system and make it up as you go along and just do it your own way. And you will be singing all by yourself, and you will have none of that harmonized energy from everyone in history who's doing the same ritual behind you. So that's a choice you're going to have to make.
That's actually something that I've kind of been over here thinking about while Aaron's been talking, is the fact that you really do have to have an open mind and kind of get rid of some preconceived notions about things, because these entities will challenge your perceptions, your worldview.
Oh, yeah.
If you're doing this magic and you're doing it right, it will change you. And it will change your perception of the world around you.
So much to the point that 20 years later, you're shocked at just how far removed from everyone else you really are. But, I do want to say something, because one thing I've learned over the years is you make a point in writing or in an interview, and people take that point and make more of it than they really should. So I want to add in a little caveat here. When you are working with the grimoires, and I can't stress this enough, there are two groups of people who wrote the grimoires. This is being very simplistic, but I'm making a specific delineation between the two specific groups of people, okay? One half are really your more famous ones. These are the guys who wrote the Goetia and the Key of Solomon, some of your later but more important grimoires, or more popular, I should say, grimoires. And these guys were that clerical underground that Professor Kuykefer describes in Forbidden Rituals, and I talk about them in Secrets as well. They were basically clergy. They were in the order of exorcists. Their job was to go around and exorcise nasty spirits of sickness and mental illness and such out of people. So their contributions to the grimoires are very harsh. There is a lot of, I'm a miserable sinner, I'm a bad person, but more to the point, there's a lot of threatening and cajoling, and you will appear before me, or I will condemn you to hell, or I'll put your sigil in this box and hold it over a fire, with stinking fumes. But the other group were basically the Goen, the people practicing Goetia, real ancient Goetia. And by the time you get to, say, Agrippa, he is openly denouncing them. They are the necromancers. They're the witches. They're the people using the dark magic. They're the ones who work with the chthonic spirits. Don't do that. Don't touch those. We've been told that in so many grimoires. The book of Abra-Melin is big about that. Don't mess with those grimoires, and those evil sigils and those demons. Just use our demons, it says. So what people don't understand is that group that's being denounced by Agrippa and by a lot of the grimoires actually had a whole hell of a lot to do with what's in the grimoires. They're the other group of people who wrote the grimoires. So even though one book may say, the necromancers are evil, it'll go right on in the next chapter and give you all sorts of techniques and methods taken straight from the necromancers. They were doing the same thing. It's just that one group thought they were better because they were with the church, and all demons were evil and under the power of Satan, and Satan was evil and the enemy of God. And then you had this other group of people who didn't feel that way about it. Satan was just a crossroads trickster spirit who could grant wishes. There's a very different viewpoint, and both of those viewpoints are in the grimoires. So when we sit here and say, look, don't just change the prayers because you don't like them. Don't, make changes just because you disagree. I also want to add that caveat that you can focus on the grimoires in those two different ways. And we're not sitting here telling you have to pick up the Key of Solomon, and if that book tells you to put a sigil in an iron box and dangle it over a fire until the spirit appears, we're not telling you to do that, because the same book, the Key of Solomon, all the way in the very back, the very last chapter, tucked away so you won't notice it, is an entire system of evoking and working with the spirits through offerings on a table covered with a white cloth. And you're actually nice to them, and you ask them for things and work with them and treat them with respect. And that is the stuff that was written by those evil necromancers, the Goen. So when we say you need to follow the text, don't think we're telling you have to do evil, harsh things. This is one thing that the OTA does that I disagree with, is they understand that Ashtaroth is a form of Astarte. I agree with them there. But they use the methods of the Goetia with all of its commanding and cajoling, which I would never do. I would use the methods in the last chapter of the Key of Solomon to work with Ashtaroth, which would be to set up a table and invite her and actually have a conversation with her. If any listener that has this perception that we're on that other side, the exorcist side, we're threatening them and binding, people think that binding a spirit to a vessel means we're trapping it inside. That's not true. It means you were bound to your body when you were born. We are binding a spiritual entity to a physical object, thereby giving it a home and a place that it can stand to do its work, a home base, so to speak. So this is all consensual. The spirits like being bound to physical objects. That's why demons possess people. You know, it's spirits who are lost and hungry and disoriented, and they grab onto the first physical living thing they can and try to possess it. And what we're doing is we do that with our altars and the icons and the talismans that are on the altars. It's all very consensual, and they like it, and we get a lot of benefit, and they get a lot of benefit out of it.
To that point, you know, with the whole consensual part of it, when I first started out working with my ancestors, there were only a very small handful of ancestors of whom I knew their names. Now, unfortunately, all my blood family, except for 2 of my cousins, are now gone. So I have a whole host of ancestors that knew me in real life and whom I had relationships with, and now that has gone on and changed over the years. And I've also learned so many more of their names, so many more have come forward. I haven't...
But it was all backed up by real world research.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't just sitting at the altar and going, hey, this is your cousin Harry. You know?
Yeah. Or like, you know, the thing that happened with my great-great-grandmother, we could see her, and then that was later on confirmed.
Right.
Whenever you're working with these spirits, whenever you bind these spirits to their physical basis, whenever you are starting out your practice, I mean, even now, whenever we start working with a new entity, it's going to take time for that entity to build and grow a relationship, and for them to build power, and for them to be able to do their work and interact with all the other stuff that we have going on here. But I also think it's very telling. We've never had the need to go to extreme lengths to work with these spirits.
Yeah. In my early days, trying to work with the chthonic spirits, this is before my angel told me I didn't know what I was doing, so stop. I tried to work with them, and I actually tried some of those harsh methods, torturing the sigils and stuff, and man, all it does is get them pissed off at you. And again, like if you're dealing with the more popular sense of exorcism, and it's an actual rabid, nasty spirit who doesn't want to leave, I'm sure I could employ the harsher methods and force it out if I needed to. I have exorcised places, but I've never actually had to torture a spirit to get it to leave. I've actually been taught better methods. That's a different show.
And to that
but
too.
At the time, I couldn't. I threatened them, and all it did was make them mad, and I never got what I wanted from it.
Yeah, it sounds kind of simplistic, but my grandmother used to say you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And that is true. I don't care if it's a human that you're dealing with or one of these spirits, angelic, chthonic, or somewhere in between. 9 times out of 10, you don't need to use these harsh methods.
No. I mean, if you force an unwilling spirit to serve you, then you have one unwilling slave who will thwart you at every chance it gets because it's angry. Or you can actually build a relationship and set up a positive working environment for this entity that's mutually beneficial. And what you end up having are hordes of angels and spirits showing up, begging to get in on the deal, begging to work for you if you'll just set up an altar and give them a pot to live in and do the rituals for them. And they really love it when we post this stuff online because it gets other people doing it.
Yep.
And so now more people are feeding them and building relationships with them, and they're just ecstatic. Carrie here has actually had to turn away a spirit or two who showed up wanting a relationship, and she's like, look, I can't. So, I mean, who would want to do it? I don't understand people who even want to do it. I think the only people who want to do it the other way are the people who are caught in that dualist mindset. Yeah. Well, I'm going to work with demons, and demons are evil, rabid things that want me dead, so I'm going to treat them that way. You know, if you go into it with that kind of mindset, that's pretty much what you're going to get out of it. And you will have a bunch of angry demons chasing you down at every option.
Yeah.
I've read books written by Catholic exorcists. They're like, well, if you're going to be an exorcist, you have to be ready because the spirits are going to attack you and they're going to make bad things happen in your life. And I'm like, not if you do it right.
Yeah.
All I do is give them a better deal. Hey, you're here. This isn't your house. The people don't want you here. They've called me to kick you out. Why don't you go into this vessel and I'll take you over here and I'll put you in a really good place and you can be happy. Brother Malak actually takes them home. He puts them on a shelf and feeds them and gets a new servitor.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, you can give them a better deal. You don't have to say, it's not like The Exorcist where you have to beat them out of the person and people actually get hurt with that kind of. I think we've talked about this on the show before where, you know, people come into it with a mindset, that dualist mindset, and it just never turns out good. It's not how the spirit world really works, and you get a very twisted result when you go in that way.
I will say that I do have one particular ancestor that can be a bit difficult. Whenever he first passed away, actually it was a few months after that, because, you know, it takes time for them to kind of get their bearings and stuff. But he started being a real pain in my, you know what? And
he started interfering with her magical efforts and everything.
Yeah, I started out
because he did not approve.
After he passed away, I, you know, I'd put him on my ancestor altar. I had the discussion with him and stuff. And I knew from this particular person that I may have some difficulty with this one. So I was like, I'm going to put you up here, but I'll give you offerings. You know, you can, the candles, you know, participate, whatever. Just don't cause problems. Well, he just couldn't resist. He could not resist. And I'm like, okay, well, like anything else, I usually give him a few chances. And I waited a while and waited a while. I'm like, well, you know what? And I can't really tell you what I did with him, but I have another one of my spirits sitting on him that I don't think he ever thought he'd find himself in that position.
Yeah.
So
it's specifically tailored to him, and he's not happy with it.
No. So he's been there for a while.
So you see, these are real relationships. You can have arguments. You can have, you know, God, there's been plenty of times, not really in years, but there were times in the early years I've run right into my altar and just screamed at my angel and called her names and everything else. You know.
And it's like, and again, it's like human relationships.
Yeah, and we're humans
to some degree.
And, you know, she knows everything's taken care of, and I'm down here on the timeline flipping out, you know. And
yeah.
It's a relationship, ups and downs and goods and bads, and sometimes you won't even talk to your spirits for a while for whatever reason, and then you come back to it.
Oh, yeah, I recently went through that period where I wasn't talking to a couple of them.
No, I mean just naturally, like, not even if you're not mad at them, just like other things come up and you got other things to handle.
Yeah.
Then you start feeling bad, you're neglecting them, so you get back to it, and it's just like maintaining a friendship with a person. It really is.
I know, for example, Aaron, you and like Frater Chisan, for example, have discussions online about, you know, like the kind of Catholic exorcist kind of approach versus kind of the more spiritual offerings. And I think one of the things that both of you have talked about, and I think Dr. Skinner and others, which is a common thing, which is even if, say, one does approach a grimoire with some of that threatening language and this and that, one of the things that's common to all evocations, let's say, or the Solomonic method is, hey, now that I've gone through this whole process to contact you, give me or share with me a much simpler method where you don't have to go through, like you have to go through that to establish initial contact, but after that's done, why don't we talk about either shorthand or ways that I can contact? Can you and Carrie talk about that in terms of, even if you do go through a grimoire with that there is this evolution of, not that you would never do a full ritual, of course, but that there is this kind of relationship that develops with easier ways or more informal ways to contact them.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this goes back to the fact that they're called the keys.
Right.
It's just to open the door. All those fancy rituals. And, of course, the Goetia grimoires, like the Key of Solomon and the Lemegeton and that, they use more elaborate circles and such for protection, whereas your angelic grimoires don't really focus on that so much. The angelic grimoires can often come across as being simpler because they lack those things, but they're really not. They're really not similar. But once you've established the contact, there is no need to that. Those rituals are for establishing contact, and this goes double no, this goes triple. Back to what I'm always saying about don't menu order with spirits. You know, oh, I need this. Let me look through the Goetia and see which spirit can do it and contact that spirit. The fact of the matter is, you're not going to need relationships with 72 spirits. You're not going to need a relationship with every one of the Shem HaMephoresh angels. You're only going to need your patron and your familiars. And if other angels or spirits need to come into that at a later time or even for a temporary basis, that's fine. But that'll all be guided by your patron and familiars.
Yep.
So once you've established that initial contact with those entities, you don't have to do those elaborate rituals anymore. Honestly, once you've done the ritual, it's not even about, I need a new method. You've now established contact. You can talk to that entity anytime you want simply by stating its name and talking to it. Again, invocation is prayer. You pray to these entities. So once I have summoned, Leviathan through the Abra-Melin ritual, and I've got his oath to, work with me and not do anything to harm me any longer, and that's it. That ritual's done. I don't do the Abra-Melin ritual again because I want to talk to Leviathan. I can just go into my temple and stand at my working altar and say, Leviathan, here's what I need. And the book of Abra-Melin even tells you that. It even says the word squares are not necessarily stating the entity's name is enough. You've already connected to them. Now, past that, there are things you can do. You can ask the entity for a specific invocation or words of power that you can speak that will call them instantly. We go the route of setting up the altars. So we set up an altar, and it's got his statue or icon and or talismans, and that's where the censer is and everything that's sacred to him, and that entity is right there, and that becomes the locus of where that entity lives in our house. And, of course, it makes them very happy. The big invocations that I post every once in a while, we do one for each angel once a year. That's honestly not very different from an evocation. The only difference is it's opened the same way. I use the trumpet and everything. But instead of then going on to perform a full evocation to bring the entity and actually see it and talk to it, which is what Carrie does for me, is see them. Instead, I just do the feeding. So it's a simpler invocation and then the feeding, and I'm just talking to the entity. I'm not trying to generate a vision of the entity. That ritual is how we bind them to the statues. So the first time I perform that full invocation and feeding, that is when that entity moves into that statue and becomes bound to it. And then I take it back to their altar, and now I have a phone line directly to that entity anytime I walk up to that altar and talk to them.
Now, that being said, a lot of times whenever we have done these feedings, something significant does happen with the angel there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good Lord.
So... Oh, yeah,
this is not... even though I say I'm not doing an evocation, you still are. This is something students get confused on all the time. Well, what's the difference between having a vision of the angel and evoking it to visible appearance and evoking it to the astral? There is none, guys. That is all modern nonsense. If you read Dee's journals and you see what Kelly went through, they didn't use different rituals to generate different experiences. Dee went into his oratory and just said prayers until the angels showed up. Sometimes Kelly could visually see them. Sometimes they would speak through him in a mediumistic style. Sometimes he would feel them inside of his head. Sometimes he saw visions in the crystals. Sometimes he saw the whole room full of angels.
Yep.
Sometimes he would have dreams and then come back and tell Dee about them. And there was no difference between these methods mentioned anywhere in the journals.
And as someone that actually happens with, because I have dreams, I have visions, I have...
You use the same rituals to generate all of those.
Yeah, I mean...
So when I do these invocation rituals, when I say I don't proceed to an evocation, I mean in an official sense. I don't go on to read. I have specific things that I read and do when I'm actually wanting to open up the gate enough for them to step out and for Carrie to see them and hold a conversation. But they're still there when you do these invocations. They still come down, and they're still in the room. They're still there to receive the offering. So you are still calling, you are still evoking them for all intents and purposes. There is no difference. And like Carrie said, a lot of times significant things will happen when we call them and have these invocation rituals. And that's another good reason to do them once a year. It's not like I do it once and now the entity's bound to the object and now we don't have to do it again. I redo it every year, at least to the best of our abilities.
Yeah.
When that particular angel's planet is strong in a ruling sign. Like, for instance, when Samael, his angels are protecting the house. So once a year we feed him, and then he tells us what we need to do to go outside and refresh all the barriers around the house. And there's a great example of where the spirit is telling us what to do, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with what's written in any book anywhere. He's just giving us instruction. And that's how a lot of this really does work.
That touches on Aaron and Carrie. Another question from Annalise is, what was one of your biggest magical failures, and what did you learn from said magical failure? Okay,
well, mine wasn't actually a failure, it was a success. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a mistake. I might have even told you the story before, because I read this question earlier, and we've been thinking about it, because, we don't really have a lot of rituals that we try and then don't get our results, But
I won't bring up certain specific other...
I mean, there might be a thing or two. But
Not ours.
The biggest failure, the biggest mistake I made that I can directly point to, biggest oops. I mean, this is like on the level of Gavois burning his house down, right?
See, I wasn't going to mention that.
Okay, so first of all, you have to understand, when I started studying Enochian magic, I was given leave by the angels to speak the language aloud without burping up bullfrogs, right? So the way I learned the language and the way I deciphered the language the way you see in my books is I sat down with the first word of the first call, which is ol, and then I kept that in my head, and I looked at the second word, which is san. And then I looked at the third word and the fourth word. And the whole time that I'm looking at each word of the call, I'm thinking in my head, ol, 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 ol. And what I was looking for were any word that had like a variant spelling of the same word. Like if the word had a similar definition, and then I could spot if maybe an L was in there as a root word, So this is how I did it. And when I went through all 48 keys, I went back to the second word of the first call, which is sand. And I went san, 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 all the way through the keys again. And I did that. It took me months. So skip forward now where I'm just beginning to really do my serious work with the Abra-Melin spirits. And like I said, my angel wouldn't let me work with them for a while. And this is a good example of why. Now, I had already broken out of the mindset, the dualist mindset, that these guys are evil. But I hadn't quite yet figured out that not evil doesn't equal friendly or safe. Okay, and this is a big problem people have. They hear me say, hey, all of these underworld spirits are not actually evil. And they go, oh, okay, well, then I guess I can go work with them. Well, bears and tigers and lions are not evil either. But that doesn't mean you want to run out in the woods and hug one, okay? I hadn't yet figured out that simple little truth. So I decided I was going to do the same thing with the Abra-Melin spirits that I had done with the Enochian calls, because I wanted to find any other versions of the same names within the list, because some of them do repeat. So I started with the first spirit, and in my mind I repeated his name over and over and over and over again as I went through the entire list. And then I went back to the second spirit, and I repeated his name over and over and over as I went through the whole list. I continued doing this, but I finally had to leave off the project when the boils began to appear on my legs. Boils we could not figure out a source for and could not stop. They crept over the entire lower half of my body. Flies infested the house.
Yep.
We could not find a source for them. We could not get rid of them. We ended up moving out of the house, and that's when that fly infestation stopped.
There was another plague too, but I can't remember what they were.
There was a couple other things that happened, and we're like, why is all this weird biblical crap happening? And then we realized it was me being a dumbass and sitting there and chanting these demons' names over and over and over again while I was studying them. And I hadn't been given any kind of leave to do that safely like I had been given leave with the angelical language. So, yeah, that was pretty painful. And maybe my house didn't burn down, but we did have to abandon the place.
Yeah, but if you think about it, we actually moved on to something better at that point.
We did move on to something better. But I tell you what, don't make the mistake of thinking that just because I say they're not evil means that they're not dangerous and that they won't hurt you.
And that you have to be careful of.
They are wild. They're wild, feral creatures, just like a dog or a wolf or a bear or anything like that. And yes, you can tame them and work with them and have great relationships with them. But they are still wild creatures, and you have to remember that. And I forgot that, and I paid for it. My whole family paid for it. But I got the boils. and everyone else had to live with the biblical infestation of flies.
There was something else. I can't remember what it was now.
Yeah. I don't know. What was your biggest mistake or failure or whatever?
Aside from talking to Rufus Opus one time.
Yeah, I guess now she's stuck in that mire.
You know, that poor bastard, I don't know what he was thinking when he friended me. Maybe he just had this impression that I'm like this nice, quiet person because I don't really participate in a lot of the online stuff.
Yeah, but
no. But it also provides me an opportunity to mess with Aaron occasionally. I mess with both of them equally. It's awesome.
Yeah, she instigates us.
And I have actually instigated a couple of things now. That was brilliant. You can play them to like cards. It's awesome.
Oh, I know. Trust me, when they come on together, it's always a good experience.
Remember that 10 top jokes I thought of when I saw Rufus in that quote unquote ridiculous getup? She was the one that egged me on to post that.
Yeah, he posted that picture, and I'm like, why haven't you gone and done anything about this
How
yet?
can you just let this pass? We had magic fail, but that was early on, when we didn't know what we were doing.
I can't think of anything like dramatic that's happened to me that was the result of an operation going awry. Don't get me wrong, I have asked for things that haven't come through, but usually I can look down the road eventually and see some reason why.
Because sometimes the answer is no. I mean, you can ask the spirits for things, and sometimes the answer is no. You can't have that.
You can't call that necessarily a failure, I think, because we are human.
Hey, sometimes they stop you from asking for something that you didn't know you don't want.
Right.
If you have a good relationship with them and they care about you, they will sometimes go, you really, no, I'm not going to give you that because they know something else that's coming or
some other piece of the puzzle
that you don't know, and it'll take a while for them to transmit to you exactly what's going on, but in the moment they'll say no. I guess one of my biggest things was early on when I was very dualist. Like I said, I used to try to threaten and torture the spirits, so that could go into that list. But I do remember the first time I tried a full Megaton evocation, and it was so early I wasn't even doing the full thing. I didn't have the circle and I didn't have everything right. But I used the conjurations and the sigil, and I tried to call Horus, who is a form of Horus. I kept expecting this cat-looking creature to appear into my vision. What ended up happening was I just kept seeing the eye of Horus in the triangle. And I didn't understand why. And I remember asking, why won't you appear to me? What is this? Why are you giving me this symbol? And he said, because I'm too vast to appear before you in this way.
I remember you.
And that was when I really understood that I was totally misunderstanding who these spirits were and how that they're not just little lesser spirits that you can trample underfoot and command around, that they are actually very large deity spirits.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, but...
And two, with me, I do tend to be very, very careful and very cautious about what entities I choose to work with, how I work with them. As adventurous as I am as far as magic goes, I'm also very cautious.
And plus we don't do that menu order thing. We don't just look up a random spirit and cold contact it. We have relationships with our spirits, so... And
to that, too, I have, Aaron kind of talked about a little earlier, I have had spirits come to me. And the first time that happened, it was really... Bune came to me in a dream. And
we weren't even sure if she should say yes or no. We had to do divination on it.
and that's the thing. He offered me a hell of a deal, and I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? And I'm like, and I remember telling Aaron about it that morning. And I'm like, why in the hell is he showing up asking to work with me? Isn't this supposed to be the other way around? And he was like, well,
sometimes they evoke you.
Yeah, and
it's a two-way street.
But I ended up turning him down. Thanks for the offer.
We got in the readings, we kind of got the impression he had an ulterior motive anyway.
Right.
He was after something.
What I look back and what I think is funny now is that basically everything that he was offering me in that dream has now come to pass, but through a different avenue.
There's reason for her to be told, no, you don't work with this spirit, because they knew stuff that was coming that she didn't know. So that's why it's always good to do a divination and ask your spirits if you should do this or whether this is a good idea, and they'll direct you.
And, whenever I woke up from the dream, I was a little like, WTF is this? Yeah. But I was also like, hey, this is kind of interesting.
It's a big change from that angel that showed up and said Beelzebub and left.
Right.
Now years later, she's getting cold contacted by Goetia spirits.
So in that way, I am very cautious. I don't see the necessity to just throw caution to the wind and do this and do it. I try to be as careful as I can and very carefully word my petition.
Yeah, don't ever say by any means
never
necessary.
Say by any means necessary.
It will take the path of least resistance right away, buddy.
Some of us are smart enough to know that to begin with, but I won't name any names.
Others had to learn that lesson. But with my boils and flies, I can't talk. Now that I've said that, Rufus will never let me live it down either.
Oh, no. And then one of you will turn the other one into a newt. It'll just...
Yes. That seems to happen on a regular basis.
He's only ever had Aaron turning him into a newt. Now he's got me to contend with.
We have, Carrie and Aaron, Shad asks, I'm curious how Carrie and Aaron sort out their specific roles during rituals. Do they do some parts in chorus, or do they switch out for specific parts? And how do they decide these specific roles?
I think that's where our Golden Dawn training has really...
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, we've been in the order for over 20 years, or I'm coming up to over 20 years now.
Yeah, you're at 21 now.
As far as that specific subject goes, I tell you what, the training there has been invaluable. I mean, we've learned how to work in a group. We've learned how to do rituals, like you have someone to initiate, but not enough people, not enough officers showed up, so you have to divide the parts out. We've had situations where, there's too many people. Actually, we don't switch officers out, but we've had different logistical situations to deal with. So, I mean, it's awesome. So whenever we put together our rituals, it comes a little more natural. On a good example, when we did the evocation, it was more of an invocation of the four kings out at the festival, Oriens, Paimon, Araton, and Amaimon. We just naturally split it up where I would call the active elementals, and then she did the conjurations to call the passive elementals. So I did two, and she did two. And things just kind of get split up that way naturally as we go along, just because of the experience we've had in doing that kind of thing for 20 years. Some things are done in chorus.
Yep.
More often, though, we'll split things up. So I'll do one thing, she'll do the next thing. In full evocations, normally it's more of a Dee and Kelly setup, and this is just because of our natural abilities. So right. I'm the conjurer, so I'm actually standing up, moving around the temple, reciting the conjurations and calling the entities and doing all the ritual. She'll just be sitting at the altar silently, staring into the scrying medium or through the incense smoke or what have you, until she'll report to me that she sees the entities. And then we'll just go from there. So our natural abilities definitely help us divide who's going to do what, obviously. And then the rest is all just based on our experience on how to divide things up so everyone has a part and it's kind of fair, So if she's not scrying, she's not just standing there with nothing to do while I'm doing all the calls and stuff. So
Thomas Pavan asks, one thing that I always wanted to ask Aaron is about the Abra-Melin evocations. What is the procedure, and how has it distinguished itself when compared to other traditional systems of evocations?
Well, there are differences, but honestly, the simple answer is there's not really that much of a difference. The method by which you evoke spirits doesn't really change, if that makes sense. I mean, different grimoires and different cultures will have their own ways of going about it. So there are differences there. Like, for instance, the Abra-Melin system, you're not going to have a big complex protective circle because you're doing your work in an oratory. And that oratory is your protective space. The Abra-Melin doesn't make use of sigils and, talismans and such. You have the word squares, and even the book says the word squares are secondary. But aside from that, I mean, and this is something I'll be teaching in that final Abra-Melin class I keep promising my poor students, but haven't delivered on yet. I will be going over the method of conjuration for the spirits of the system, and it's really not that different from a Solomonic conjuration. First, you're going to go to your Eastern altar, and you're going to work with your angel through the Abra-Melin formula. Prayer and confession first, and then you stand up, and you're going to open up that silver almadel, and you're going to call the angel and ask for protection and anoint yourself with oil and everything. And then you'll turn and face out of the oratory, and you're going to recite conjurations for the 12 chiefs So, I'll call the 4, Lucifer, Leviathan, Belial, and Satan, and I'll call them from their 4 quarters. And then you call the next 4, and then you call the next 4. Once you've got all in, the last 4 of those 12 are actually the focus of the system. So I'm actually going to call Orions or Paimon, Araton, or Amamon, depending on which spirit I'm working with. And that king is the one who will actually bring that spirit. So it's not really the formula that you're using there to actually call the spirits and work with them is not that different from the other grimoires. It's just that a lot of the talismans and tools that are required in those grimoires are not required for Abra-Melin because they're handled in a different way. You don't have a sword or you don't have a black-hilted knife, but you have the wand. And the wand serves the purpose of your authority and commanding the spirits with. And, again, you don't have a circle because you have an oratory. And it doesn't make use of sigils and magical figures. And there's a reason for that, but I'm not going to that's a whole different explanation. So those are the main differences, but in essence, if you learn about conjuring spirits, like out of Secrets of the Grimoires or out of my classes, you're going to find a lot of similarity between that and what you would learn from me in my Abra-Melin class on how to conjure those spirits.
This question's for both of you. Brandon McCluskey asks, often things go awry in my rituals. How do Carrie and Aaron keep their cool and continue with the work when, let's say, the only lighter you have doesn't work or your drunken neighbors just pulled in and sit outside and talk with their friends? Does this detract from the mechanics of the work?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, well.
Tell us about your drunk neighbors. Just joking.
We moved to a good place. We live at the end of a dead-end street.
We've been here
There's a vacant lot
over 9 years
now.
now.
There's a vacant lot across from us. And directly next door to us used to be a little old lady, sweet little old lady. We could vibrate in here at the top of our lungs and she wouldn't have been able to hear us. She passed away, but her daughter, or her granddaughter?
Ex-daughter-in-law.
Her ex-daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
So her daughter, essentially, daughter-in-law, moved in. And she seems to really like us, and apparently we don't do anything over here that bothers her, and she doesn't make any noise. So we really don't have that issue. I used to have that more in my early days when we'd work in apartments and stuff, and you'd have outside noises and
the lighter's not working or
that kind of
stuff like that.
Yeah, honestly, this is an area where people overcomplicate things. Like let's say I'm in the middle of a working, and I realize that I need something, but I either don't have the book maybe. Or I don't know where it is. We lose, like, where's the Key of Solomon? I don't know. You had a lat. We'll do that all the time.
Or one time I took it up north with me.
Right. Wait, did you take the Key of Solomon out of state? Yes, I did. I'm sorry. It was an accident. So that happens. So, like, let's say I'm in the middle and I don't have the book. And I'll run out. And I will grab my phone and I'll bring it back and I'll go to Esoteric Archives and I'll look up what I need. And I've met people who just... their eyes get so big when I say, you bring a phone into the middle of your circle? You leave your temple in the middle of the way? It's like, look, guys, the spirits aren't just going to go away because I went and grabbed my phone, It's
not to say that we
do magic based on protocol, not psychology.
We are a couple of hot-headed Celts.
Yeah.
And we will get aggravated.
Being aggravated for ritual is not unusual around here. But if I need something, I'll go grab it.
But you just move on.
And I'm not saying that, I don't need the grimoire, I'll just use my cell phone. No. But at the same time, I'm not so anal about it that I won't let a cell phone into the circle because they didn't have cell phones in the 1300s. Who cares? The spirits don't care. But,
just to the actual question, how do you get past these problems that can show up, annoying neighbors, things that don't want to work.
You just handle it. Just because you have to break for a minute to handle it doesn't mean the ritual is now...
Here's how I look at it. You can get aggravated and you can, go through all of that, whatever. But I had a little training in performing and stuff. The show must go on. You can't just let this, you might get a little distracted, but you have to be able to bring your focus back. Because sometimes, it's just you being scatterbrained and not getting the things you need. Sometimes it's outside influences. Sometimes it's the spirits messing with you, seeing how far they can push you. But any one of those, you just kind of have to put it in the back of your brain and say, and refocus, and this is what I'm going to do. Now, we have had discussions with spirits where we're feeling like, and I've done this a lot, where it's like, okay, you need to stop messing with me. I need to get this done. Let's just get this done, you know?
Oh, yeah, there's been times we've actually stopped a ritual.
Oh, yeah.
And addressed the spirits and said, all right, guys, you're either going to fall in line and stop messing with us, or we're going to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And we've even done that in Golden Dawn work.
Oh, yeah.
I remember one time we had to stop a ritual and attack Amlet in the Sphere of Yesod. And get him under control before we could continue the ritual.
That's all part of magical training.
Yeah.
You have to be able to train your mind.
Plus, there are times,
refocus.
let's say you're doing a ritual and just things keep happening. That if enough of them happen, you can finally get the message that this isn't the time to do the ritual. They're trying to stop you for some reason. There are times when things happen, you just ignore them and move on. This is another place where our temple training, whether it was Golden Dawn or Wicca, but just working in a group. We've had things happen.
Oh, yeah.
I remember one time I was Hierophant, and it was an equinox ceremony. And this is before that we had figured out we should put most of the implements on the floor around the altar.
Oh,
because the instructions say to stack them on the altar. And when you get the entire temple's worth of implements stacked on the altar, oh, my God. I mean, you've got wands and swords sticking off in all sorts of directions, and it's like a Jenga. It's like a Jenga configuration, because one wrong move and it all comes down. And I remember I was doing invocations over the altar, and I hit the chalice.
Yep.
It fell over, and it just went everywhere. And this is wine. Was it wine or water?
It was wine.
It was wine. So,
and this is a temple full of people.
So the way I responded was I literally acted like it didn't happen. I set the cup upright and went right back to the invocation.
And other officers came in.
Other officers moved in and started writing things and drying things and cleaning things up, and the ritual itself never even stopped. Now compare that to when we were given the class in that store.
Oh, Jesus!
What was it that had gone wrong? It was something with a sensor, I think.
No, the girl knocked the chalice off.
That's right.
And
she
it
broke a chalice. So this is why we're thinking of it now, because it's almost the same thing. She was doing something over the altar and accidentally knocked over and broke a chalice.
And to be fair, she was completely new.
Oh, no, it wasn't her. It was the store owner. So she knocks it over.
Oh, geez,
and
right.
I'm in control of the class, right? So she knocks it over, and I'm like, no, you keep going on with your invocation. And I did the same thing. I let her go on, and I cleaned up. But someone walked out and told the store owner what had happened, and she barged in there and disrupted the whole ritual, and I'm going to do what I have to do to make this right. And I'm like, lady, we already, it's fine. We already handled it. Why are you here? And that just shows you the difference between when something goes wrong and you just throw your hands up and the whole ritual now has to stop and it's a big deal, or you don't even miss a beat. Yeah. It happened. You do what needs to be done to right it, and you keep right on going, and you don't even pause. And that's how I teach my students. So that's really the answer to that question, I think.
Neil Peel asks, in regards to their talisman making service, do Aaron and Carrie evoke the being represented on the talisman and ask the spirit to attach its office to the talisman, or is it just a basic consecration regarding the talisman making service?
Well, that entirely depends.
Yeah, that really depends. There's more than one service. You can just have us make a talisman, because the consecration is a separate fee. So we can just make it and send it to you and let you do the work. Or you can pay me to consecrate it, which is it's very inexpensive. I think it's like $50 or something. I think it's going to up it to $75 or something. But it's like under $100, right? And I'll consecrate it, but it's according to the key of Solomon. So I recite all the psalms over it, the exorcisms, I sense it and sprinkle it, all of that. And of course, if I'm doing a talisman that's kind of for a specific purpose, I'll always allow the client to provide or point me towards specific invocations they may want added. And of course, I will always state as part of the invocation what the purpose of the talisman is, and I'll anoint it with oils and all the other stuff that my spirits have told me to do. But there is also, and it's much more expensive, you can have us do a full evocation, and the talisman is part of that. So you'll get a talisman. It will still be consecrated according to the Key of Solomon, but then we will use it as part of the evocation of the entity. And then once we're done with the evocation, and of course you're allowed to provide questions, because evoking an entity is kind of a divination. I know that makes Stephen Skinner mad when I say that, but I'm not equating evocation and divination as a practice, but you call them down so you can speak to them and get answers. Otherwise, why go through all that effort? So you can provide questions that once we've evoked the entity, stated the purpose of why we've called them, then we can also ask questions. And then once that's all done, we will send the finished talisman to you.
Actually, Aaron, this is another question. In addition to Carrie being a fantastic mom, wife, business partner, artist, and clearly accepting and tolerant of varying levels of shenanigans, including your ongoing friend/nemesis bromance with Rufus Opus, please share with listeners things you deeply appreciate and admire about Carrie as a person, partner, and practitioner.
Oh my God.
Wow. Well,
no, I did not send in that question.
That question is from Annalise Antoinette.
She asked that. She doesn't ask you to say what you appreciate about me. She just, you put up with me, and that's enough.
Well, people know. I'm just teasing.
Well, like I said, I'm in the very unique position of being married to a woman that I actually like. Not just love, but like as a person. We think alike. We kind of have one brain, so sometimes we don't even have to talk. As far as, the things that just about her in particular, I mean, her mediumship abilities astound me. And also, when she gets really into her work, that often is what inspires me to kick off more work for myself. I keep talking about how I had to ignore my familiars and the chthonic spirits for so long because my guardian angel wouldn't give me permission. But it was after she started working with her ancestors that I just got the bug. And I'm like, I got to start this. I got to start this. And finally, my angel gave me permission. So it's like if she hadn't done that, I might still just be kind of sitting here waiting on when the time would, quote unquote, be right to work with my the lesser spirits. But now I've got 5 years or more of good, solid experience with working with those spirits that have been waiting for me to finally address them for 20 years. So she inspires me to work. Her talents, not just her scrying ability, which has been ridiculously beneficial to all of my own magical work, but as far as the business goes, of course, her artistic ability is invaluable. If she left me or wasn't here for whatever reason, I mean, that would be a good half or 3/4 of Doc Saul that would just be gone. The talismans, the hand-painted circles, the sigils that she paints. She does all the inscriptions on all the magical tools and everything. So she's literally a solid half of my entire magical practice. So I would definitely be less of a magician without her partnership.
And that's something.
And she's still cute, too. She's all that and the bag of chips.
We've always been able to work together that way.
Yeah.
And, not to say that we haven't had some rough patches and difficulties and stuff over the years.
Don't think it's been perfect. Oh, no.
No.
We've had our issues.
I guess like with the rest of our lives, we just kind of are stubborn and do and work on things, I'm glad to have him, and I think as much as he's glad to have me. I see so many people whose partners are not magical or whatever, or
even into something else, so they have no interest in what you do, or this is what we thought we were going to do for a while, but no.
And we have, like we said before, we have maintained some separate practices, but we still have that magical partnership too that brings us back together.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, the forces that be just kind of put us together, and I can't imagine.
We're pretty convinced that we're Dee and Kelly reincarnated. We still have not been able to shake each other, so we're hoping we can complete the work in this life and then move on. No, I'm just kidding.
I got one last question here, also from Annalise, which is, as you look at all of your accomplishments and look forward, as you say, to the future, not even looking back, what do you most want your magical legacy to be? How would you like to be remembered generations from now even? I mean, you were just joking about, completing the work and moving on, but how do you want people, or what do you hope, your magical fingerprints are years from now?
Oh, wow. Well, I think Aaron himself has accomplished this already. He's left a hell of a legacy of all kinds of books and information and all that kind of stuff. I hope I'll be remembered for all the artwork and that kind of stuff. And it thrills me to no end to know that a lot of these things that I've created are now all over the world. That's something, as a kid, I was so excited. I wanted to be able to have my stuff go all over the world, and it's happened. I hope we don't leave an impression after we're gone that we were giant jerks or something. It's kind of a very basic thing. And in some of my work, I do hope, I've told my ancestors this, that through this work, I kind of have the Egyptian idea of immortality where your name is remembered. Not only myself, but my ancestors, and whatever that may be in the future. If I'm I will be at least one person's ancestor.
Right.
To have that legacy and to have our names remembered.
For me, it's like as long as things go well, I think I'll be proud of having brought the old magic back into the West. If my name is listed among the group of people who are responsible for doing that, or at least being big movers and shakers in doing that, it's been really fascinating. I started out in Wicca and Don Craig style magic, just like everybody.
Yeah.
And little by little, this whole world has been opened up that has been sealed off from the West for so long. And it's so fascinating to watch it now kind of coming back.
Yeah.
That's the legacy. Like I said, as long as it goes well, as long as it doesn't end up corrupt and we end up with something like what's going on with Candomblé down in South America.
Yeah.
Where you have more corrupt people doing it than you have honest people, and it's just a big mess with people having wars with each other and stuff. I don't ever want to see that happen. I don't want to see Solomonic magicians sending Raphael out to make each other sick. You know what I'm saying? But I do like seeing us realize that spirits are real, getting over the psychological model of magic. Not to say that there's no psychology in magic, there is, but the psychological model is incorrect and I think ultimately harmful. And it's just part of the disconnect that we in the West have had from nature and the planet that we live on and the damage that's done. So I want to see people connecting with the genus loci in their areas and working with these angels and spirits as not mental constructs, but real entities who care about what happens to the world and to the people in it. If I'm part of that legacy, that'll make me proud.
Looking at Doc Solomon's and looking at the classes, and I loved the Solomonic magic class. I thought that was absolutely fantastic because it really gave you, to your point, Aaron and Carrie, about that initial kind of base of the pyramid, as I kind of see it, like that foundational knowledge. And then from there, you can move around these pieces and whatnot, but you have to make those initial connections. And so I really found those valuable. So I did want to ask both of you, can you give the listeners a little preview about either the classes? Like, I know we have some questions on when will the Solomonic Magic 102 or 201 classes begin, or like Carrie or tarot classes. Can you give our listeners a little preview on what they might expect later this year with your classes? And also, can each of you kind of give our listeners a little bit of a preview about the long-term plans with Doc Solomon's?
It's going to be a big year for us, I think.
Yeah, we got a lot going on through the spring. And then, like I said, as far as products go, we want to release the elemental products if we can get that done. Actually, we've got a lot of it already done. I just need to do some grunt work that I haven't had time to get to, making labels and stuff. So we'll have the four archangels. So Michael, the Archangel of Fire, Gabriel, Water, Raphael, Air, and Oriel. So all you guys who have been waiting on us to release Oriel products, we're actually going to be releasing Oriel or Uriel products.
Why don't you talk about your classes first?
The classes, the biggest thing that I know my students who are listening are going to be chomping at the bit for is, number one, the Abra-Melin classes. I had to add a class onto the end of that for after Abra-Melin, I had to use the system and work with the angel and spirits. But I'm actually still in the midst of writing that, and that got derailed last fall when Carrie had to go up to New Jersey and all that happened. As early as I humanly possibly can, I want to get back to that because I wrote some incredible material about the spirits, who they are, where they come from. A lot of it was based on a research Jake Stratton Kent did. So, I was using Pandemonium and Geosophia and stuff and really learning about the history of these spirits and added to that what I've learned about them. So that's all in there, and that's going to be in this final Abra-Melin class I want to get together as soon as possible. Then, of course, you already had someone ask about the 102 course. I still am not sure on when that will be released. I wish I had a release date. I can tell you that the way the course is going to work is starting to actually finally formulate in my mind. I've got some of the classes already planned out. So it's definitely in the creation stage now rather than just the idea stage. But again, I'm going to have the time to sit down and write the classes out and figure out details. The good news is a lot that's going to be in this final Abra-Melin class everyone's waiting on is also going to make up some of the class material in the 102 course. So the 102 course, for those who are wondering, because in the basic Solomonic course, as we've discussed, it's all the basic stuff: cosmology, lore, astrology, how to do consecrations, putting together your basic tools, setting up your altar. And I give a little practical magic, spell work, candle offerings you can do. But everyone is really chomping at the bit for what's in the second class, where we will focus on chthonic spirits, evocation, both angels and chthonic spirits. So all the more advanced and frankly more dangerous stuff is all going in the 102 material. So once I get the Abra-Melin class, that final class done, then I can finally start writing the advanced Solomonic stuff. So possibly by the fall, I hope. If I can really get on it, if one of my spirits really pushes me, maybe by the summer. We are definitely going to be offering our Ancestor class.
Yeah.
That'll be a one-shot class. That'll be real simple. And I think there's some other classes that we've given live that we want to kind of retrofit and give them online. I'm still considering taking my Hermetic material, which gets off of the Solomonic subject, but I give a series of Hermetic Golden Dawn style classes, but they've always been live, very participation heavy, so it's been a little more difficult thinking of a way to do that online, but I'd like to do that as well sometime probably later this year. And so there will be new classes coming, probably a lot more one-off classes than whole courses than we've done so far.
I do want to expand some of the tarot material. The beginner's course is currently 8 weeks.
Oh, and redo that course in the Zoom format.
Yeah, I actually do have to re-record all of my tarot classes now because we switched platforms, which I hope to do after all the dust settles. There's some other things in real-life classes. I have both intermediate and advanced tarot material, but kind of like Aaron, some of that has been difficult for me to try to figure out ways to translate into an online format. But hopefully in the second part of this year, that will come. Last year, I was at the very beginning stages of starting to record some kind of magical art classes, just showing basic materials of what folks need to collect to do their own talismans, to do some of the artistic work that the grimoires require.
All in the old way.
Yeah, and all in the old way, because I do work in a very old-fashioned, hands-on way. It's how I learned. At least to me, it produces some really fantastic results. Kind of going into that a little bit, I really recommend people kind of work on their own talismans as much as they can and all, because that too is a connection to the spirits that you're working with. I really have to wonder if all the artwork and all the talismans and all the series of things that I've done over the years hasn't helped my magic and helped my relationship with these entities. Because it's basically hours and hours of meditative practice. That's something I hope to do, and it's going to be probably a series of just one-off classes, from just the basics of materials of what you need, different kinds of brushes, preparations of, if you choose to use parchment, there's all kinds of preparation that goes into the parchment before you can even use it. So I'm hoping to get some into that. And then, of course, Doc Solomon's is going to be expanding. There's some things I really don't want to put out there quite yet. There's some really big things happening with Doc Solomon's. I can't wait to see what happens. We've got big plans this year. Yep. And all of this has been made possible not only through our spirits, but through the support of our community and our patrons.
You're right, we are a niche business. It's not like we see strangers come through the business every day. It's the same names. It's our loyal customers. We depend on repeat business, and they've really been incredible to us. It's just amazing. And overall, we are so... even as magical people, we are so incredibly blessed and lucky. Yeah.
It blows my mind that, we've been able to develop the relationships
We're still waiting for the universe to say, nah, it can't be this good. You knew it couldn't be this good.
Well, I'm actually just coming off of that period where, going way back, I was having Al Bundy experiences from Married with Children, where it's like there's no way this can be happening.
All these good stuff. That's just the universe getting ready, drawing back the
it's gearing up, but no,
it's wonderful, and no sign of it stopping anytime soon. So
we're really, really excited.
Still in disbelief, and we're very excited. God, if we had told our parents 20, 30 years ago that we were going to be professional wizards for a living, they would have probably kicked us out of the house, but they would have done it laughing at us.
My mom did know, and I think unless you're really involved in this, it's really kind of hard to fathom.
Yeah.
Because it is so outside.
That community, our culture doesn't have that community. So when you tell just a regular person what you do, I find myself trying to use examples like, have you ever been to, Sina Botanica, and they do the cleansings and they do the candle lighting?
A total muggle that's just like.
Even then they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. So it's like, well, I'm a priest. That's it. I'm a priest. I light candles. I pray for people for a living. There you go. It's just that simple.
It's like, how do you even begin to explain to someone, not even what Solomonic magic is or Solomonic grimoiric tradition, but just, what engagement, non going to a church every Sunday engagement with spirits even looks like,
Right.
And the fact that you do that for a living, it just...
And that's another reason we want to make the videos and stuff, too, is so people can see this stuff, that, like that whole video of the whole family going out and gathering herbs and stuff, because this is the way we live. It's not just, like I said, it's not a hobby.
Actually, it just occurred to me
every day.
That as this moves forward, there will be more videos produced, and especially like more of the nature stuff as I get to know the local spirits. When we move to our new place, there'll be new videos about our new property and everything. So stay tuned for that.
Well, I know the listeners will definitely be staying tuned for more updates, more videos, more materia, magica, and cannot thank you both enough, Carrie and Aaron Leitch, just for taking the time and coming on the podcast today. And congratulations. Just wish you all the best on future Solomonic endeavors. Thanks so much for coming by.
As always, it's awesome.
Yep, it's always a lot of fun.
Thanks as always goes directly to you, the listeners, for always kicking butt and sharing your time to enjoy the podcast. In the meantime, you can subscribe and check out previous episodes and other magical Glitch Bottle news on YouTube, youtube.com/glitchbottle, and you can download and listen to podcast episodes on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher Radio. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on YouTube, and if you do subscribe, make sure to hit that little notification bell for new episodes as soon as they post, and you can follow us on Twitter @GlitchBottle. Our intro music is the track Tornado by David Zeste. Our magical interest is fueled by sincerity, passion, amazing guests, and a copious amount of clinking coffee cups. Until next time, this is Alexander F. reminding you to invoke often, uncork the uncommon, and keep the light.